Tyler grabbed her clothes from the closet and hurled them through the open window onto the rain-soaked street below. "You did this on purpose!" he screamed, his face twisted with rage. "You trapped me with that thing inside you!" Sarah stood frozen, 7 months pregnant, watching her belongings scatter across the wet pavement while neighbors gathered on porches to stare. "I never loved you," Tyler spat. "I was just killing time until something better came along." He shoved past her swollen belly without a second glance and slammed the door so hard the walls shook. 72 hours later, Sarah Mitchell would sign papers for a condemned house that cost exactly $1. The whole town would laugh at the desperate pregnant woman who bought a rotting shack. But hidden beneath those warped floorboards was a dead woman's letter and a secret that would change everything. Subscribe to our channel and follow Sarah's incredible journey to the very end. Drop a comment with the city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels across the world. Tyler's hands were shaking when Sarah walked through the apartment door that Wednesday evening. Not from fear, not from guilt, from excitement. "You're early," he said, shoving something into his back pocket. Sarah set down her purse. "Rosie let me go, said I looked tired." She rubbed her swollen belly. "The baby's been kicking all day. I think she knows something's wrong." I've been calling the baby she. Feels right." Sarah smiled, waiting for Tyler to smile back. He didn't. "What's in your pocket?" "Nothing." "Tyler." He pulled out a bus ticket. One way, Willow Creek to Miami, departure time tomorrow, 6 a.m. Sarah's heart stopped. "What is that? What does it look like?" "It looks like you're leaving." Tyler laughed. The sound made Sarah's skin crawl. "Took you long enough to figure it out. I've been planning this for 3 weeks. Sold the car last Tuesday. Gave notice at work on Friday. Called my cousin in Florida yesterday to confirm I could crash at his place." 3 weeks. He'd been lying to her face for 3 weeks while she rubbed his shoulders after work and cooked his favorite dinners and talked about baby names like they had a future. "What about our baby?" Sarah's voice cracked. "Your baby." Tyler grabbed a duffel bag from behind the couch. "I never wanted kids. I told you that on our second date. You said you weren't ready yet. You said maybe someday. I said whatever I needed to say to keep you happy and keep the sex coming. That's what guys do, Sarah. We lie. We tell women what they want to hear." He zipped the bag shut. "You should have known better." Sarah grabbed his arm. "Please, we can figure this out. We can—" Tyler shoved her, hard. She stumbled backward, her hip catching the edge of the coffee table, her hands flying out to protect her belly as she fell. She hit the floor. The impact knocked the wind out of her. For 3 terrible seconds, she couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything except lie there. Or with her hands wrapped around her stomach, praying the baby was okay. Tyler stepped over her like she was furniture. "Don't contact me," he said from the doorway. "Don't try to find me. Don't put my name on the birth certificate. As far as I'm concerned, we never happened." The door slammed. Sarah lay on the floor, gasping, feeling the baby move inside her. Still alive. Still there. Still depending on her. She pulled herself up to sitting, her hip throbbing where she'd hit the table. Through the window, she could see her clothes scattered across the wet street below. A neighbor was picking through them, holding up a sweater, checking if it was worth keeping. Sarah started to cry. The landlord came the next morning. His name was Dennis Hartley, and he'd always made Sarah uncomfortable. The way he looked at her, the way he stood too close when he collected rent, the way his eyes dropped to her chest even now when she was 7 months pregnant and clearly in distress. "Tyler called me yesterday," Dennis said, leaning against the doorframe. "Said you two were splitting up. Said you probably couldn't afford the place on your own. I can make it work if you give me time." "How much time?" Dennis crossed his arms. "You're a waitress, Sarah. You make what, $300 a week? $400 on a good month. This apartment costs $1,200. I'll pick up extra shifts. I'll find a second job." "You're pregnant. Who's going to hire a pregnant woman for a second job? You'll be on maternity leave in 2 months. Sarah felt her options narrowing like walls closing in. "Please, I just need a chance." Dennis smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. "Tell you what, I might be able to work something out, reduce your rent a little, maybe let you stay on a month-to-month basis." "Really?" "Sure." He stepped closer, close enough that Sarah could smell the cigarettes on his breath. "I'm a reasonable guy. I'm sure we can find some kind of arrangement." His hand touched her shoulder. His fingers started moving toward her neck. Sarah stepped back. "Get out." "Come on, sweetheart. Don't be like that. I'm trying to help you." "Get out of my apartment." Dennis's face hardened. Fine. You've got 30 days. After that, I'm starting eviction proceedings. He walked to the door and paused. You should have been nicer to me, Sarah. You should have been a lot nicer. The door closed behind him. Sarah stood in the middle of her apartment, shaking her hands pressed against her belly, where the baby was kicking frantically as if she could feel her mother's fear. 30 days. She had 30 days to find somewhere to live, or she and her baby would be on the street. The shelter had a 3-week waiting list. I'm sorry, the woman behind the desk said. She sounded like she meant it. We're completely full. We've got women sleeping in the common areas as it is. The best I can do is put you on the list and call you when something opens up. 3 weeks is too long. I'll be on the street by then. I know, I'm sorry. There's just nothing I can do. Sarah walked out of the shelter and sat on the curb outside watching cars pass, trying to figure out her next move. She'd already called everyone she could think of. Her parents were dead killed in a car accident when she was 19. She had no siblings. Her only aunt lived in Oregon and hadn't spoken to her in 5 years. Her friends from high school had drifted away the way friends do when you're working double shifts and too tired to return calls. There was no one. She had no one. A police car slowed as it passed her, the officer inside giving her a long look. Sarah stood up quickly and walked away before he could stop and ask questions. The last thing she needed was some cop deciding she looked suspicious, looked like trouble, looked like the kind of person who didn't belong, sitting on curbs in nice neighborhoods. She got in her car and drove to the diner. Rosie was behind the counter when Sarah walked in, her gray hair pulled back in its usual ponytail, her apron stained with the day's specials. You look terrible, Rosie said. What happened? Sarah told her everything. Tyler, the landlord, the shelter, the 30 days she didn't have. Rosie listened without interrupting, her face getting darker with each new detail. That worthless piece of garbage, she said when Sarah finished. If Tyler ever shows his face in here again, I'll put a frying pan through his skull. That won't help me find somewhere to live. No, it won't. Rosie was quiet for a moment. You can sleep here, in the back room. I've got a cot I use sometimes when I'm too tired to drive home. Rosie, I can't. It's not charity. It's a cot in a storage room that smells like French fry grease. It's the least I can do for someone who's been showing up on time for 3 years. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. The cot's lumpy and the room gets cold at night. Rosie handed her an apron. Now get to work. Table 6 has been waiting for their check for 10 minutes. Sarah lived in the back room of Rosie's diner for 11 days. 11 days of sleeping on a cot that was too short for her pregnant body. 11 days of showering at the truck stop off the highway, $2 for 15 minutes of lukewarm water. 11 days of eating leftover food that Rosie pretended to throw away but always seemed to end up in containers next to Sarah's coat. On the 12th day, Rosie's boyfriend found out. His name was Carl, and he owned the building the diner was in. He showed up during the lunch rush, his face red with anger, demanding to know why there was a pregnant woman living in his property without his permission. She's not living here, Rosie said. She's just staying temporarily while I don't care what you call it, I want her out, tonight. Carl, be reasonable. I am being reasonable. I could call the health department. I could report you for running an unlicensed boarding house. I'm giving you until tonight to get her out, and that's more than I should. Sarah didn't wait to hear the rest of the argument. She grabbed her bag from the back room and walked out the back door. She sat in her car for an hour trying to figure out what to do next. The shelter still had a 2-week waiting list. She'd called again yesterday. Every affordable apartment required first and last month's rent, plus a security deposit, which added up to more money than she'd ever had at one time in her life. The church she'd tried last week had given her a bag of groceries and a pamphlet about Jesus, but no actual help with housing. She was out of options. That night, Sarah slept in her car for the first time. She parked in the back corner of a church parking lot as far from the streetlights as she could get. She reclined the seat as much as her belly would allow and wrapped herself in every piece of clothing she owned. The temperature dropped to 42 degrees. The heater in her car worked for about 20 minutes before making a grinding noise and giving up. Sarah lay there in the dark, shivering, feeling the baby kick, and tried to remember what it felt like to be warm. At 3 a.m., headlights swept across her car. Sarah's heart nearly stopped. She held her breath, praying whoever it was would keep driving. The light stopped. A car door opened. Footsteps approached. A flashlight beam hit her window. Ma'am, you all right in there, police? She could see the uniform now. The badge reflecting in the flashlight glow. Sarah rolled down her window. I'm fine, officer. Just resting. At 3 a.m. in a church parking lot. I had a long drive, needed to stop for a bit. The officer, young maybe 25, with a face that hadn't learned to hide its sympathy yet, looked at her belly, looked at the clothes piled around her, looked at the frost forming on her windshield. "Ma'am, are you homeless?" Sarah wanted to lie, wanted to protect what little pride she had left, but she was so tired, so cold, so completely out of fight. "Yes," she whispered, "I'm homeless." The officer was quiet for a long moment, then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a $20 bill. "There's a motel about 2 miles up the highway. Tell them Officer Rodriguez sent you. The owner's my uncle. He'll give you a room for the night, no questions asked." Sarah stared at the money. "I can't take this." "You're pregnant and it's 40 degrees outside. You can take it." He pressed the bill into her hand. "Go get warm. Figure out the rest tomorrow." Sarah drove to the motel and paid for one night. She took the longest, hottest shower of her life. She slept in an actual bed for the first time in almost 2 weeks. In the morning, she went back to work at the diner and pretended nothing had happened. Maria Gonzalez had been working at Rosie's Diner for 15 years. She was 53 years old with gray streaks in her dark hair and hands that were rough from decades of hard work. Her husband had died of a heart attack 6 years ago. Her kids were grown and scattered across the country. She lived alone in a small house on the edge of town and came to work every day because it was better than sitting in silence and thinking about everyone she'd lost. Maria had been watching Sarah for weeks. She'd noticed the dark circles under the girl's eyes. She'd noticed the way Sarah's uniform was getting tighter around her belly, but looser everywhere else, like she wasn't eating enough. She'd noticed that Sarah never talked about going home anymore, never mentioned Tyler, never made plans that extended beyond the next shift. On a slow Tuesday afternoon, Maria finally asked, "Where are you staying?" Sarah looked up from the coffee pot she was filling. "What?" "You heard me. Where are you staying these days?" "Because I know you're not at that apartment anymore, and I know Rosie's boyfriend kicked you out of the back room." Sarah's face went pale. "How do you know about that?" "I've worked here 15 years. I know everything that happens in this diner." Maria sat down in the nearest booth and patted the seat across from her. "Sit. Talk to me." Sarah sat. She didn't talk at first, just stared at the table, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had gone cold hours ago. "My car," she finally said. "I've been sleeping in my car." "For how long? 12 days? 13 if you count tonight?" Maria closed her eyes. "Madre de Dios. It's not that bad. I found a gym that has a free trial membership so I can shower there, and Rosie's still letting me eat here. I'm managing." "You're 8 months pregnant and sleeping in a car. That's not managing. That's surviving." "What's the difference?" Maria reached across the table and took Sarah's hand. "The difference is that surviving isn't enough. Not for you, not for that baby." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "I don't have any other options. The shelter's full. I can't afford an apartment. I don't have any family. I've tried everything." "Have you tried buying a house?" Sarah laughed. It was a bitter sound. "Sure, let me just pull $50,000 out of my pocket." "I'm serious." Maria pulled a folded newspaper from her apron pocket. "Look at this." She spread the paper on the table, pointing to a small notice in the classified section. "County property auction, abandoned properties. Starting bid $1. $1, Maria said. "That's the starting bid for a house. A condemned house. Something that's probably falling apart." "Probably. But a falling apart house is better than a car. At least a house has walls, a roof, space to put a crib." Sarah stared at the notice. "I don't know how to fix a house. I've never held a hammer in my life." "My husband was a contractor for 30 years. Before he died, he taught me everything he knew. Plumbing, electrical, drywall, I can do it all." Maria squeezed Sarah's hand. "If you're willing to put in the work, I'll teach you. For free. No charity, just help." "Why would you do that?" "Because 40 years ago, I was exactly where you are. Young, pregnant, alone, no idea how I was going to survive. A stranger helped me when no one else would. I've been waiting my whole life to pay that forward." The auction was in 4 days. Sarah had 4 days to decide if she was desperate enough to bid $1 on a house that everyone else had given up on. She decided in 2. The Willow Creek County office smelled like despair and old coffee. Sarah arrived early wearing the nicest clothes. She still owned a blouse that didn't quite button over her belly and pants that cut into her waist if she sat down too fast. Her hair was clean, pulled back in a neat ponytail. She'd even put on makeup, trying to look like someone who belonged at a property auction instead of someone who'd been sleeping in her car for 2 weeks. The waiting room was almost empty. A man in an expensive suit sat in the front row, scrolling through his phone like he had better places to be. A young couple whispered to each other near the windows, the woman holding a folder full of what looked like renovation plans. An older woman sat alone in the corner, watching everyone with sharp, calculating eyes. Sarah took a seat in the back and tried to become invisible. The clerk running the auction was a woman in her 60s named Deborah. She called the properties one by one, starting with commercial lots and farmland that went for prices Sarah couldn't imagine. The man in the suit bought a warehouse for $80,000. The young couple got a farmhouse for $12,000, congratulating each other loudly on their steal. Then Deborah got to the property on Persimmon Lane. Lot 47, she read, squinting at her clipboard. Residential structure on approximately half an acre, vacant for 23 years. Classified as a demolition liability. Structure does not meet current building codes. County has waived back taxes in exchange for buyer assuming responsibility for renovation or demolition. She looked up. Starting bid is $1. Anyone? Silence. The young couple snickered. Who'd want that money pit? The man said, loud enough for everyone to hear. The woman in the corner shook her head. Wouldn't take it if they paid me. Deborah sighed. This property has been on the auction list for 4 years, no previous bids. Going once at $1, Sarah raised her hand. Everyone turned to look at her, the pregnant woman in the back row, her hand trembling in the air, her face flushed with embarrassment and determination. Deborah blinked. Ma'am, you're bidding $1. Yes. Have you seen this property? No. Do you understand what you're purchasing? The structure is not habitable. There are no working utilities. The county inspector rated it a 70% chance of structural failure within 5 years. I understand. The young couple burst out laughing. The woman didn't even try to hide it. She laughed so hard she had to wipe tears from her eyes. Is she serious? The man asked. That place is a death trap. She's going to kill herself and that baby. Sarah's face burned, but she kept her hand up. Deborah looked at her for a long moment, looked at her belly, her secondhand clothes, the desperation she was trying so hard to hide. Any other bids? Deborah asked, her voice carrying a note of hope, like she was giving Sarah one last chance to be saved from her own decision. Silence. Property on Persimmon Lane goes to Sarah Mitchell for $1. Sarah walked to the front of the room to sign the papers. The young couple was still laughing. The man in the suit was smirking. Even Deborah looked like she pitied her. Sarah signed her name with a steady hand. Congratulations, Deborah said, stamping the paperwork. You just bought yourself a house. Behind her, Sarah heard the young woman whisper to her husband, she'll be begging on the street within a month. Mark my words. Sarah didn't turn around. She walked out of the county office with her head high and her shoulders straight, clutching the deed to a house that everyone said was worthless. She got to her car before she started shaking. Persimmon Lane was barely a road at all. Sarah's Civic bottomed out twice on the potholes before she reached the turnoff marked only by a rusted mailbox that had lost its door years ago. The dirt path beyond was worse more hole than surface, and she had to crawl along at 5 miles an hour to avoid destroying what was left of her suspension. The house appeared suddenly emerging from the overgrown vegetation like something that had been trying to hide. Sarah stopped the car and stared. It was smaller than she'd imagined. Smaller than her apartment had been. Smaller than the storage room at Rosie's. The paint was green or had been green once, now faded to something closer to gray. The roof sagged in the middle. The porch was rotting. The single window facing the road was so clouded with grime it looked like a cataract. What did I do? Sarah whispered. What did I just do? She got out of the car, picking her way through waist-high weeds to reach the front door. The steps were just cinder blocks stacked unevenly, and she had to grip a porch railing that felt disturbingly loose to pull herself up. The door was stuck. She threw her shoulder against it once, twice, 3 times before it gave way with a screech of swollen wood. The smell hit her first. Dust and mildew and something dead. She pressed her sleeve against her nose and stepped inside. The main room was covered in a thick layer of gray dust. Cobwebs hung from the ceiling. Something skittered in the corner, a mouse probably, or something worse. The floor creaked dangerously under her weight. Sarah checked the bathroom. Rust-stained sink. Toilet that had turned orange. Shower stall with a curtain that had disintegrated into shreds. She checked the bedroom. Small dark with a window that was stuck shut and a closet door that fell off its hinges when she touched it. She checked the kitchen. Cabinets hanging crooked. Laminate counter peeling away from the base. Sink that didn't work when she tried the handle. Sarah stood in the middle of the main room and looked around at this place she'd bought for $1. Then she sank to the floor and sobbed. Not quiet tears. Not dignified crying. deep, ugly sobs that shook her whole body and made the baby kick frantically inside her as if protesting the accommodations. She cried because Tyler was gone, because her parents were dead, because she was 27 years old and 8 months pregnant and sitting in a condemned building that might collapse on her at any moment. She cried because she was so tired of being strong, so tired of fighting, so tired of pretending everything would be okay when nothing had been okay for a very long time. She cried until there was nothing left. Then she wiped her face, pushed herself up from the dirty floor, and started making a list of everything she needed to fix. Maria arrived the next morning at 7 a.m. sharp. She walked through the house slowly, knocking on walls, checking electrical outlets, testing the floor with her weight. Sarah followed behind her, trying to read her expression. "Well, Sarah asked when Maria finished her inspection, "how bad is it?" "Bad." Maria turned to face her. "But not impossible. The bones are solid. So they built houses to last back in the 50s. It's everything else that needs work." "Where do I start?" "Safety first. We need to check the electrical panel, make sure nothing's going to catch fire. Check for gas leaks. Check the foundation for structural problems." Maria paused. "And we need to check under the floors." "Under the floors?" "Old houses hide secrets. Previous owners stashing things they didn't want found. Animals making nests. Water damage that's worse than it looks." Maria met her eyes. "You never know what you're going to find when you start pulling up old boards." They spent the next 3 days working from dawn to dusk. Sarah learned how to check electrical connections without electrocuting herself. She learned how to identify load-bearing walls. She learned which pipes were copper and which were galvanized steel and why that mattered. She also learned that her body had limits she hadn't known before. On the second day, she stood up too fast and the room started spinning. She grabbed the wall for support, but her legs gave out and she went down hard, catching herself on her hands and knees. "Sarah," Maria rushed over. "What happened?" "I'm fine, just dizzy." "When did you last eat?" Sarah tried to remember. Yesterday, the day before time had blurred together in the chaos of trying to make this house livable. Maria's face went hard. "You're 8 months pregnant and you're not eating. Are you trying to hurt that baby?" "No, I just forgot. You forgot to eat." Maria pulled Sarah to her feet and marched her to the car. "We're going to the diner right now. You're going to eat a full meal. Then we're going to have a conversation about taking care of yourself." Sarah ate 2 plates of scrambled eggs and toast while Maria watched her like a hawk. "You can't do this alone," Maria said when Sarah finally pushed her plate away. "I know you think you can. I know you think you have to. But you're growing a human being inside you, and that takes energy. You need help." "I don't have anyone to help me." "You have me?" Maria reached across the table. "And you have Rosie, and Mr. Patterson, who's been asking about you every morning, and half the regulars in this diner who've been watching you work yourself to death for 3 years. She squeezed Sarah's hand. "You have people, Sarah. You just have to let them in." Mr. Patterson was 81 years old. He'd been coming to Rosie's diner every morning for longer than anyone could remember. Same booth, same order, same time. Black coffee, scrambled eggs, white toast. He read the newspaper while he ate, occasionally grumbling about politics or the weather or the state of the world. Sarah had always liked him. He was grumpy in a harmless way, like someone who'd earned the right to complain but didn't expect anyone to actually fix anything. He tipped well said, please and thank you, and never made comments about her body the way some of the male customers did. She hadn't known he'd been leaving her extra money until Maria pointed it out. "That 5 on the table, Huss," Maria said after Mr. Patterson left one morning. "That's not a tip, that's a gift." "What do you mean, Tilt? His Social Security barely covers his rent. He eats here because it's cheaper than cooking at home. There's no way he can afford to tip $5 on a $3 breakfast." Sarah looked at the bill on the table. $5, enough for gas, enough for groceries, more than she could spare herself most days. The next morning, she approached Mr. Patterson's booth before he could leave. "Mr. Patterson," she said, sliding into the seat across from him, "I need to talk to you." He looked up from his newspaper, his cloudy eyes sharpening with attention. "Something wrong?" "You've been leaving me extra money. Maria told me. I can't accept it." "Why not?" "Because you can't afford it. Because I'm not a charity case. Because you're too proud to let an old man help a young woman who needs it." Mr. Patterson folded his newspaper and set it aside. "Is that about right?" Sarah opened her mouth to argue, then closed it again. "Maybe." Let me tell you something about pride. Mr. Patterson leaned forward, his voice dropping. Pride is what kept me from asking for help when my wife was sick. Pride is what made me try to handle everything alone until I damn near killed myself. Pride is the reason I almost lost my house and my savings and everything I'd worked for. He met her eyes. Pride is a luxury, Sarah. It's something rich people can afford. The rest of us have to swallow it and accept help when it's offered. Sarah didn't know what to say. Now, Mr. Patterson continued, Maria tells me you bought that old house on Persimmon Lane, the one that's been sitting empty for 20 years. 23 years. That's Aunt Eleanor's house. Sarah's heart stopped. What? Eleanor Patterson, my mother's sister. She and her husband built that place back in the 50s. Lived there for 40 years before she moved to South Carolina. Mr. Patterson's eyes went distant, lost in memory. I haven't thought about that house in years. After she died, her daughter handled the estate. I assumed it had been sold or demolished or something. Eleanor Patterson, Sarah repeated. The name meant nothing to her, she'd never heard it before, but something about the way Mr. Patterson said it made her pay attention. What was she like? Stubborn as a mule, tough as nails. She and Uncle James built that house with their own hands when they didn't have 2 nickels to rub together. Everyone said they were crazy buying land in the middle of nowhere, building something so small. He smiled, but they made it work for 40 years, raised 3 kids in a house smaller than most people's living rooms. Sarah thought about the tiny structure she'd bought for $1. The house everyone laughed at. The house everyone said was worthless. Maybe it wasn't as worthless as everyone thought. The breakthrough came on a Thursday afternoon. Sarah was in the kitchen, pulling up a section of damaged flooring that had become a tripping hazard. She'd been working for hours, her back aching, her feet swollen. The baby kicking with increasing irritation. She pulled up a warped board and heard something different. Hollow. The space beneath sounded hollow, not solid like the rest of the floor. Sarah knelt down awkwardly with her belly in the way and pressed her palm against the wood. It moved, shifted slightly like it wasn't nailed down properly. She worked her fingers under the edge and pulled. The board came up easily, too easily. Someone had cut it to be removed without tools. Beneath the board was a rectangular space lined with yellowed plastic, and sitting inside that space was a metal box. Sarah's hands were shaking as she lifted it out. Heavy, 5 or 6 pounds. When she shook it, she could hear papers rustling inside. The latch was rusted but functional. She pressed the release, and the lid popped open. Papers, stacks of them, some yellowed with age, some newer. She lifted them out carefully, spreading them across the kitchen floor. On top was an envelope, sealed with tape that had lost its adhesive years ago, written on the front in careful cursive, for whoever finds this place worth saving. Sarah opened the envelope. Inside was a letter, handwritten on lined paper. My name is Eleanor Grace Patterson. If you're reading this, it means you found my little house, the one everyone told me wasn't worth keeping. James and I built this place in 1952 when we were young and poor, and the world seemed determined to make sure we stayed that way. It was never big, it was never fancy, but it was ours, and that made it everything. I'm writing this because I want whoever finds it to know what this house meant to us, and because I want to leave something behind for whoever needs it most. Under this letter, you'll find documents, land surveys, deeds agreements, things my husband collected over 30 years piece by piece, keeping them separate because he didn't trust anyone with what he was building. James bought land his whole life, small parcels whenever he could afford them. By the time he died, he owned 43 acres behind this house, land that nobody knew about except me. In 1978, a mining company came to us. They found something valuable in the ground. Kaolin, a type of clay used in paper and ceramics. They offered to buy the land outright. James refused. Instead, he negotiated a lease agreement, 15% royalty on everything they extracted for 99 years. The company went bankrupt in 1985, but the agreement never died. It passed to whoever bought their assets, then to whoever bought those assets. It's still valid, still owed to whoever owns this property. I don't know who you are, I don't know what brought you here, but if you're reading this, you probably need help. Nobody buys a house like ours unless they're desperate. What you're holding isn't charity, it's inheritance from one survivor to another. Fight for it. You deserve to keep what you find. With hope, Eleanor Grace Patterson, January 14, 2001, Sarah read the letter 3 times. Then she looked at the other documents spread around her. Land surveys showing 43 acres. Deed signed by James Patterson across 3 decades. A mining agreement with numbers at the bottom that made her heart stop. Then she started to scream. Not from fear, not from sadness, from something she'd forgotten could exist. Hope. The next morning, Sarah walked into Rosie's diner and found Mr. Patterson in his usual booth. "I need to show you something," she said, sliding in across from him. Her hands were trembling. Her voice was shaking. She pulled the letter from her pocket and placed it on the table between them. "What's this to read it?" Mr. Patterson picked up the letter. Sarah watched his face as he read, watched the confusion turn to recognition, turn to something that looked almost like pain. "Where did you find this?" His voice was rough. "Under the floorboards, in your aunt's house. There's a metal box hidden there. It's full of documents, land surveys, deeds, something about a mining agreement." Mr. Patterson set the letter down. His hands were shaking now, too. "She did it," he whispered. "That crazy old woman actually did it." "Did what?" "She used to talk about leaving something behind, something hidden for whoever needed it most. I thought she was just being sentimental." He looked up at Sarah, his cloudy eyes wet with tears. "I should have known better. Aunt Eleanor was never just sentimental. She always had a plan." "The documents," Sarah said. "Are they real? Is any of this possible?" "Uncle James bought land his whole life, little pieces whenever he could. He didn't trust banks, didn't trust the government, didn't trust anyone to know what he had." Mr. Patterson wiped his eyes. "If Eleanor says there are 43 acres and a mining agreement, then there are 43 acres and a mining agreement. What do I do? You need a lawyer, someone who knows about property law and mineral rights, someone who can verify everything and tell you what it's worth." He pulled out his phone. "I know someone. My nephew's wife went to school with a woman who does this kind of work. Let me make a call." The lawyer's name was Angela Reyes. Her office was small but professional, filled with law books and family photos and certificates on the walls. She spent 3 hours going through Sarah's documents, asking questions, taking notes, making sounds that could have meant anything. Sarah sat in the uncomfortable chair across from Angela's desk, 8 months pregnant, exhausted, terrified, hoping. Finally, Angela set down the last document. "This is remarkable," she said. Sarah's heart dropped. Remarkable bad or remarkable good? Remarkable genuine. Angela leaned back. "I've been doing property law for 20 years. I've never seen documentation this meticulous. James Patterson kept better records than most lawyers I know." "So it's real. It appears to be real. The land surveys match county records. The deeds are properly filed. The mining agreement." Angela pulled out the thick document. "This is actually brilliant. The way it's written, the lease transfers automatically to any successor owner. That's not standard language for this era. James Patterson was either very lucky or very smart." "What does it mean for me?" Angela took off her glasses and rubbed her eyes. "It means you potentially own 43 acres of land that nobody knew existed. It means there's a valid mining agreement with a company that's been extracting minerals from adjacent properties for years. It means you might be owed significant royalties." Sarah couldn't breathe. "How much?" "I don't know yet. I need to do more research, find out who owns the mining rights now, what they've been extracting, what the calculations would be." Angela met her eyes. "But I can tell you this kaolin is valuable. If there are confirmed deposits on your land, and if the company has been operating without paying the legitimate owner," she paused, "we could be talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars." Sarah gripped the arms of her chair so hard her knuckles went white. "There's more," Angela said. "The company that currently holds the mining rights Southeastern Resource Partners has been trying to locate the owner of your property for years. They want access to those deposits. They're prepared to negotiate." "Negotiate for what?" "A new lease agreement, monthly payments tied to extraction volumes, long-term income that could support you and your baby for decades." Sarah's vision blurred with tears. "Is this real? Am I dreaming?" Angela smiled. "It's real, and it's just the beginning." The negotiations would take months. Angela had warned her about that. Lawyers on both sides, paperwork verification back and forth that could drag on for the better part of a year. But Sarah didn't need to wait for the final settlement to know that everything had changed. She went home to the tiny house on Persimmon Lane, home she could call it that now, and stood in the kitchen where she'd found the metal box. The letter from Eleanor was still spread on the counter. Sarah picked it up and read the final lines again. "What you're holding isn't charity. It's inheritance from one survivor to another. Fight for it. You deserve to keep what you find." "Thank you," Sarah whispered to the empty room. "Thank you for believing someone would come. Thank you for hiding help where pride couldn't touch it. The baby kicked, hard, as if agreeing. Sarah pressed her hand against her belly and smiled. You hear that? She said to her daughter. A woman who died before you were born just saved our lives. She never knew our names. She never knew we existed, but she knew someone like us would come along. The baby kicked again. Your name is going to be Grace, Sarah decided. Grace Eleanor Mitchell, after the woman who gave us everything. Outside the window, the sun was setting over 43 acres of land that belonged to her. Inside the walls of a tiny house that everyone had laughed at, a pregnant woman stood alone and let herself believe for the first time in months that maybe, just maybe, things were going to be okay. Not because she'd gotten lucky, not because someone had rescued her, but because a stubborn old woman had planted a seed decades ago, trusting that the right person would find it. Sarah had found it, and she was never going to let it go. 3 days after Angela confirmed the documents were real, Southeastern Resource Partners sent their first offer. Sarah was at the diner when her phone rang. She stepped into the back hallway, her heart pounding, and answered. They want to meet, Angela said. Tomorrow morning. They're sending a team from their Atlanta office. A team? How many people? 3 lawyers and a negotiator. They're not messing around, Sarah. They know what they owe you, and they're going to try everything to minimize it. Sarah pressed her hand against the wall to steady herself. What do? You show up, you let me do the talking, and whatever number they throw at you first, you say no. What if it's a good number? It won't be. The first offer is never good. It's a test to see how desperate you are. Angela paused. Are you desperate, Sarah? Sarah looked down at her swollen belly. 8 months pregnant, living in a condemned house, surviving on tips and borrowed time. Yes, she admitted. I'm desperate. Then don't let them see it. Desperation is a weapon they'll use against you. Tomorrow, you walk in there like you've got all the time in the world, like you could walk away and never look back. Can you do that? Sarah closed her eyes. I'll try. Trying isn't good enough. You need to do it. This is the fight of your life, and the only way you win is by making them believe they need you more than you need them. The call ended. Sarah stood in the hallway for a long moment, her hands shaking, her mind racing. Then she went back to work. The next morning, February 3rd, Sarah put on the only professional outfit she owned and drove to Angela's office. The Southeastern team was already there when she arrived. 3 men in suits that cost more than her car, carrying briefcases that probably held more paperwork than Sarah had seen in her entire life. The negotiator was a woman named Patricia Crane, blonde and polished and smiling in a way that didn't reach her eyes. Ms. Mitchell, Patricia said, extending her hand. Thank you for meeting with us. We're so pleased to finally connect with the property owner. Sarah shook her hand. I'm sure you are. Patricia's smile flickered. Just for a second. Then it was back bright and false. Shall we get started? They sat around Angela's conference table, Sarah and Angela on one side, the Southeastern team on the other. Patricia opened a folder and slid a document across the table. We've prepared an offer we think you'll find very generous, Patricia said. $50,000 for full transfer of all property rights, including mineral claims. This would be a clean break, no ongoing obligations, no future complications. Just a simple payment and you walk away. Sarah looked at the number. $50,000. More money than she'd ever had. More than she could imagine earning in 2 years of waitressing. She felt Angela's hand on her arm. A warning. No, Sarah said. Patricia's smile didn't waver. I understand this is a lot to process. Perhaps you'd like some time to. I said no. The answer is no. Ms. Mitchell, I don't think you understand the complexity of what you're dealing with. Property disputes like this can take years to resolve. Legal fees alone could... I understand perfectly. Sarah leaned forward. You've been extracting minerals from my land for years without paying royalties. You owe me back payments that are worth a lot more than $50,000, and you want access to deposits that will be worth even more in the future. She held Patricia's gaze. I'm not desperate enough to take the first number you throw at me. The room went silent. Patricia's smile finally disappeared. Perhaps we should take a short break. The Southeastern team huddled in the corner, speaking in low voices. Sarah watched them, her heart pounding so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. Angela leaned close. That was perfect. You rattled them. I feel like I'm going to throw up. That's normal. Just don't actually throw up. It would undermine the confidence thing we've got going. The team returned to the table. Patricia's face was different now, harder, more businesslike. "Let's discuss the specifics," she said. "What exactly are you asking for?" Angela took over. "Full payment of accumulated royalties from the date Southeastern acquired the mining rights. That's approximately 15 years of extraction at 15% of revenue. Our preliminary calculations put that figure between $300,000 and $400,000. One of the lawyers made a choking sound. "Additionally," Angela continued, "we want a new lease agreement with improved terms. 20% royalty instead of 15% tied to market rates with annual adjustments, and a guarantee that extraction operations will not impact the residential portion of the property." Patricia's face had gone pale. Those terms are unprecedented. So is a company extracting minerals for 15 years without paying the legal owner. We're being generous, Ms. Crane. We could pursue criminal charges for mineral theft. We could go to the media with a story about a pregnant woman being cheated by a billion-dollar corporation. Angela smiled. "We're offering you a clean resolution. I suggest you consider it carefully." The meeting ended without an agreement. Patricia promised to take the counteroffer to her superiors. Sarah walked out of Angela's office feeling like she'd just run a marathon. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we wait. They'll come back with another number. It'll be better than 50,000, but not as good as what we're asking. We'll negotiate from there." "How long will that take?" Angela looked at Sarah's belly. "Hopefully not longer than you've got." 2 weeks passed. February 17th. Sarah kept working at the diner, kept fixing up the tiny house, kept waiting for a call that didn't come. The baby was getting bigger, moving more pressing against her organs in ways that made it hard to breathe. Maria came by every other day to help with repairs. They'd fixed the roof, patched the walls, replaced most of the rotted flooring. The house was starting to look like something a person might actually live in. "You're doing good work," Maria said one afternoon watching Sarah sand down a window frame. "Your hands are steady. That's important." "My hands are the only thing that's steady. Everything else is falling apart." "The lawyers." "No word in 2 weeks. Angela says that's normal, that big companies take time to make decisions. But I can't stop thinking about what happens if they just decide not to pay." Maria set down her paintbrush. "Then you fight. You take them to court. You make noise until they can't ignore you anymore." "I can't afford a court battle. I can barely afford groceries." "Angela's working pro bono. And there are other ways to fight that don't cost money." Maria's eyes were sharp. "When my husband was cheated out of his pension, we didn't have lawyers. We had ourselves and our community. We showed up at the company headquarters every day for 6 months. We talked to reporters. We made their lives miserable until they did the right thing." "Did it work?" "He got 70% of what he was owed. Not everything, but enough." Maria picked up her paintbrush again. "You're not alone in this, Sarah. You've got people, and people can move mountains when they work together." The call came on February 23rd. Sarah was in the middle of her shift when her phone buzzed. She saw Angela's name and nearly dropped a plate of pancakes. "They came back," Angela said. "New offer, $150,000 for the accumulated royalties plus a lease agreement at 18%. Sarah's knees went weak. "Is that good?" "It's better, but it's still not what you deserve." Angela paused. "Here's the thing, Sarah. I think we can get more, but pushing harder means more time, more negotiation, more uncertainty. You've got a baby coming in a few weeks. I need to know how much fight you've got left." Sarah looked around the diner, at Rosie behind the counter, at Maria refilling coffee cups, at Mr. Patterson in his usual booth, watching her with worried eyes. "I've got plenty of fight," she said. "Tell them no." Angela laughed. "That's what I was hoping you'd say." March 1st. The due date was getting closer. Sarah woke up at 3 a.m. with a contraction that made her gasp. She lay in the darkness of the tiny house, one hand on her belly, counting the seconds. 45 seconds. Then nothing. She waited. 10 minutes passed. 20. No more contractions. False alarm. Braxton Hicks. Her body practicing for the real thing. But it was a reminder that time was running out. She called Angela the next morning. "We need to close this deal, soon." "I know, I've been pushing. They're scheduled for another internal meeting on Friday. I should have an answer by Monday." "Monday might be too late. The baby could come any day now." "I understand, but I can't force them to move faster. All I can do is keep the pressure on." Sarah hung up and sat on the edge of her bed, trying to breathe through the fear. She'd come so far, found the documents, hired a lawyer, stood up to a corporation that thought they could steamroll her, but none of it would matter if the baby came before the deal was done. What would happen then? Would she be stuck in a hospital trying to negotiate from a delivery bed? Would she miss her chance because her body decided it was time? The baby kicked as if sensing her anxiety. "Not yet," Sarah whispered. "Please, just give me a few more days." The call came on Friday, March 5th, not Monday. Friday. Angela's voice was different, excited in a way Sarah hadn't heard before. "They caved," Angela said. "Full accumulated royalties, $320,000. New lease agreement at 20% with annual adjustments, and they're agreeing to the property buffer zone." Sarah couldn't speak. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. "Sarah, are you there?" $320,000, Sarah finally managed. "Are you serious?" "Dead serious. They want to close by the end of next week. They're tired of fighting, and I think someone higher up realized the bad publicity wasn't worth the money they were trying to save. I won. I actually won. You won, but Sarah, there's something else, something I need to tell you in person. Can you come to my office tomorrow morning?" The excitement in Sarah's chest turned cold. What is it? What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. It's good news, but it's complicated, and I want to explain it face to face. Sarah barely slept that night. She kept turning Angela's words over in her mind, trying to figure out what complicated good news could possibly mean. She'd won the negotiation. She was getting the money. What else could there be? At 9 a.m. on Saturday, she walked into Angela's office. Angela was waiting with coffee and a folder that looked thicker than usual. "Sit down," Angela said. "This might take a while." Sarah sat. Her back ached. The baby was pressing against her bladder, but she forced herself to focus. "When I was verifying the property documents," Angela began, "I did a deep dive into the land records for the entire area, not just your 43 acres, but everything connected to it." "Okay?" "I found something that wasn't in the metal box." Angela opened the folder. James Patterson didn't just buy land behind the house. He also bought mineral rights to adjacent properties that were later sold to other owners who didn't realize the mineral rights had been separated. Sarah shook her head. "I don't understand." In the 1960s and 70s, it was common practice to sell land separately from mineral rights. You could own the surface of a property without owning what was underneath it. James took advantage of this. He bought mineral rights to several parcels around his main holdings, probably for very little money at the time. Angela pulled out a map and pointed to areas marked in red. These properties are currently owned by Southeastern Resource Partners. They bought them thinking they had full rights to extract. But according to the documents I found, James Patterson owned the mineral rights, which means they've been extracting from property he owned. Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. "Not just from my 43 acres. From everything around it." "Exactly. The back payments we negotiated, that was just for the original agreement. This is separate. This is additional money that nobody knew about, including Southeastern." Sarah felt dizzy. "How much?" "I don't have exact figures yet. I need to do more research, verify the documents, calculate extraction volumes. But if these mineral rights are valid, and I have every reason to believe they are, we could be looking at another settlement, potentially larger than the first one." Sarah gripped the arms of her chair. "Are you telling me there's more money?" "I'm telling you that James Patterson was a lot smarter than anyone gave him credit for. He didn't just hide one secret under those floorboards. He built an entire empire that nobody knew existed." Angela smiled. "Your grandfather." "He wasn't my grandfather. I never met him. I never even heard of Eleanor Patterson until I found that letter." "No, but she chose you. Her letter said the house would find its way to someone who needed it, and it did." Angela leaned forward. "You're not just inheriting their money, Sarah. You're inheriting their legacy. Everything they built, everything they protected, it's yours now." March 8th, 3 days until the signing. Sarah was cleaning the tiny house when the first real contraction hit. It started as a tightening in her lower back, spreading around to her belly like a belt being pulled too tight. She gasped and grabbed the kitchen counter, waiting for it to pass. 60 seconds. Then it faded. She stood still, breathing slowly, counting the minutes. 7 minutes later, another one, stronger this time. "No," Sarah said out loud. "Not yet. Please, not yet." She called Maria. "I think I'm in labor." "How far apart are the contractions?" 7 minutes, maybe 6. "That's still early. You've got time, but you should get to the hospital soon." "I can't go to the hospital. The signing is in 3 days. If I'm stuck in labor..." "Sarah," Maria's voice was firm, "the baby is more important than any piece of paper. Angela can handle the signing. You need to take care of yourself." Sarah knew Maria was right. but she couldn't shake the feeling that something would go wrong, that if she wasn't there to sign the documents herself, everything would fall apart. Another contraction hit. 5 minutes since the last one. "I'm coming to get you," Maria said. "Don't argue, just be ready." Maria arrived 20 minutes later. Sarah was sitting on the porch, her overnight bag packed, her hands pressed against her belly. "How far apart now?" 4 minutes. "Then we need to move." The drive to the hospital took 35 minutes. Sarah had 6 contractions on the way, each one stronger than the last. By the time they pulled into the emergency entrance, she was gripping the door handle so hard her knuckles had turned white. The nurses took over. They got her into a wheelchair, into a room, into a hospital gown. A doctor checked her and announced she was 5 centimeters dilated. "You're progressing fast," the doctor said. "First babies usually take longer, but this one seems eager to meet you." Sarah called Angela from the hospital bed. "I'm in labor." "Now you're in labor right now." "The contractions are 3 minutes apart. The doctor says it could be a few hours." Angela was quiet for a moment. "Okay, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to call Southeastern and move the signing up. If we can get the documents ready by tomorrow, I can bring them to the hospital. You can sign from your bed if you have to." "Can we do that? Is it legal?" "It's legal. It's not ideal, but it's legal. The important thing is getting your signature on those papers." Angela paused. "You focus on having that baby. I'll handle the rest." The labor lasted 14 hours. 14 hours of contractions that came faster and stronger until Sarah couldn't think about anything else. 14 hours of Maria holding her hand and coaching her through each wave of pain. 14 hours of nurses checking monitors and doctors making pronouncements, and Sarah wondering if she was strong enough to do this. At 11:47 p.m. on March 8th, Grace Eleanor Mitchell was born. She weighed 7 pounds, 2 ounces. She had dark hair like her mother and blue eyes that the nurses said might change. She screamed. When she entered the world, a loud, healthy cry that made Sarah laugh and sob at the same time. "She's perfect," the nurse said, placing the baby on Sarah's chest. "Absolutely perfect." Sarah looked down at her daughter's face, at the tiny nose and the rosebud mouth and the fingers that were already reaching, already grasping for something to hold on to. "Hi, Grace," Sarah whispered. "I'm your mom. I've been waiting my whole life to meet you." Grace opened her eyes and looked up at her mother. For one moment, everything else disappeared. The hospital, the pain, the exhaustion, the legal battles, the money, the fear. There was only this, a mother and her daughter meeting for the first time. Then a nurse interrupted. "Ms. Mitchell, there's a woman here to see you. She says she's your lawyer." Angela walked into the room, carrying a folder, and wearing an expression that was half congratulations, half business. "She's beautiful," Angela said, looking at Grace. "I'm sorry to intrude, but we have a situation." Sarah's heart sank. "What kind of situation?" "Southeastern moved up the deadline. They want the document signed by midnight tonight, or they're withdrawing the offer." "Midnight. That's in 15 minutes. "I know. I've got the papers right here." Angela pulled documents from her folder. "I need you to sign in 4 places. Can you do that?" Sarah looked at her daughter sleeping peacefully against her chest. She looked at the papers Angela was holding. She looked at the clock on the wall at 11:46 p.m. "Give me a pen." Sarah signed the documents one-handed, her other arm cradling Grace. Her signature was shaky. She'd just given birth. She was exhausted. She was holding a newborn, but it was legible. Angela checked each page, then nodded. "It's done. You just secured $320,000 and a 20% royalty on all future extraction." Sarah leaned back against the pillows, tears streaming down her face. "We did it, Grace. We actually did it." Angela gathered the documents. "Get some rest. You've earned it. I'll file everything first thing in the morning." After Angela left, Sarah lay in the hospital bed with her daughter sleeping on her chest. She thought about Tyler, who'd walked away because he didn't want the burden of a child. She thought about Dennis, the landlord, who'd tried to exploit her desperation. She thought about the young couple at the auction who'd laughed at her for buying a worthless house. None of them knew what she'd just done. None of them would ever understand what she'd survived. But Sarah knew. And someday when Grace was old enough, she would tell her. She would tell her about Eleanor Patterson, who'd hidden help where pride couldn't touch it. She would tell her about James Patterson, who'd built an empire that nobody knew existed. She would tell her about the tiny house that everyone had given up on and the letter that changed everything. And she would tell her the most important lesson of all, that the things people dismiss as worthless are often the things most worth fighting for. The next morning, on March 9th, Maria arrived at the hospital with flowers and tears in her eyes. "She looks just like you," Maria said, gazing at Grace through the nursery window. "Same stubborn chin, same fierce eyes." "She's going to need that stubbornness," Sarah said. "She's got a lot to live up to." "What do you mean?" Sarah told her about Angela's discovery, the additional mineral rights, the second potential settlement, the empire James Patterson had built without anyone knowing. Maria listened in stunned silence. "So there's more money?" she finally asked. "Potentially. Angela's still verifying everything, but she thinks it could be substantial." "Sarah," Maria grabbed her hands, "do you understand what this means? You're not just going to be okay. You're going to be set. You and Grace, you're going to have everything you need." "I know. I keep waiting for something to go wrong, for someone to tell me it was all a mistake." "It's not a mistake. It's a gift, from people who never knew you but believed you would come." Maria squeezed her hands. "You deserve this. Don't let anyone tell you different." They released Sarah from the hospital on March 11th. She drove home to the tiny house on Persimmon Lane with Grace strapped into a car seat in the back, the same car that Sarah had slept in 3 months ago, the same car that had been her only shelter when she had nothing. Now she had everything. She pulled up to the house and sat there for a moment looking at what she'd built, the fresh paint on the walls, the new roof that didn't leak, the flowers Maria had planted along the walkway. It was still small. It would always be small, but it was home. Sarah carried Grace inside and stood in the kitchen where she'd found the metal box. "This is where it started," she told her daughter. "This is where Eleanor's letter was waiting for us, right here under these floorboards." Grace made a sound that might have been agreement or might have been hunger. Sarah smiled and carried her to the bedroom, the same bedroom that had been too cold to sleep in 4 months ago, now warm and bright and filled with everything a baby could need. A crib Mr. Patterson had found at a yard sale. A changing table Maria had refinished herself. Clothes and blankets and toys donated by the regulars at Rosie's Diner. It wasn't fancy. It wasn't Instagram perfect. But it was theirs. Sarah laid Grace in the crib and watched her daughter sleep. "I'm going to give you everything I never had," she whispered. "Stability, security, a future you don't have to be afraid of." Grace yawned and settled deeper into sleep. Outside the window, the sun was setting over 43 acres of land that Sarah owned. Land that held minerals worth more money than she could imagine. Land that would provide for her daughter and her daughter's children and generations she would never meet. All because a stubborn old man had bought worthless parcels piece by piece. All because his wife had believed someone would come who needed help. All because Sarah had been desperate enough to bid $1 on a house everyone else had given up on. She thought about Eleanor's words, "Hide help where pride can't touch it." Sarah understood now what that meant. Pride would have kept her from buying the tiny house. Pride would have made her refuse the documents, refuse the money, refuse to believe she deserved something she hadn't earned. But she'd been too desperate for pride, too broken down to care what anyone thought. And in that moment of complete surrender, she'd found what Eleanor had hidden. Not just money, not just property, hope. The phone rang, breaking the silence. Angela's name flashed on the screen. "I have news," Angela said, "about the additional mineral rights." Sarah's stomach tightened. "Good news or bad news?" "The best news you've ever heard." Angela took a breath. "The documents are verified. James Patterson owned mineral rights to 6 additional parcels, all of which have been actively mined by Southeastern for the past decade. Based on extraction records, they owe you approximately $700,000 in unpaid royalties." Sarah's legs gave out. She sat down hard on the bedroom floor, the phone pressed against her ear. "700,000, she repeated. "Plus the $320,000 from the first settlement, plus ongoing royalties from the new lease agreement." Angela laughed. "Sarah, you're a millionaire. Not quite, but close enough. You and Grace are going to be just fine." Sarah started to cry. Not sad tears, not scared tears. Tears of pure, overwhelming gratitude. "Thank you," she managed to say. "Thank you for everything." "Don't thank me. Thank Eleanor and James Patterson. They're the ones who built this. I just helped you find it." After the call ended, Sarah sat on the floor of the tiny house, crying and laughing and holding her phone like it was a lifeline. She thought about all the people who had laughed at her. Tyler, who'd said she was ruining his life. The couple at the auction who'd called her crazy. The landlord who'd tried to exploit her. Everyone who'd looked at her pregnant belly and her cheap clothes and decided she was nothing. They were wrong. They were all so wrong. And the best part was she didn't need them to know it. She didn't need their apologies or their recognition. She didn't need anything from anyone who'd tried to keep her down. She had Grace. She had the tiny house. She had more money than she'd ever dreamed of. And she had Eleanor's letter framed on the wall of the kitchen reminding her every day that sometimes the things people dismiss as worthless are the things most worth keeping. Sarah picked herself up off the floor and walked to the kitchen. She stood in front of the letter and read the final lines one more time. What you're holding isn't charity. It's inheritance from one survivor to another. Fight for it. You deserve to keep what you find. I did fight, Sarah said out loud, and I found more than you could have imagined. She turned and looked out the window at the land that stretched behind the tiny house. 43 acres that had been waiting for her. Minerals worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. A future she couldn't have imagined 3 months ago. And somewhere she liked to think Eleanor and James Patterson were watching, smiling at the desperate pregnant woman who'd bought their house for $1 and found everything they'd hidden. The first settlement check arrived on March 24th, 2 weeks after Grace was born. Sarah held the envelope in her hands for a full minute before opening it. $320,000. More money than she'd ever seen, more than she'd ever imagined having. Her hands were shaking when she called Angela. "It's here," Sarah said. "The check is here." "Good. Deposit it today. Don't wait. And Sarah, don't tell anyone the exact amount. Not your friends, not your coworkers, not anyone." "Why not?" "Because money changes people. Not you, the people around you. The moment they know how much you have, they'll start seeing you differently. Some will resent you, some will try to use you. Some will suddenly remember how close you always were." Angela paused. "Protect yourself. Protect Grace. Keep the numbers to yourself." Sarah deposited the check that afternoon. The bank teller's eyes went wide when she saw the amount, but she didn't say anything. Professional courtesy, or maybe just shock. That night, Sarah sat in the tiny house with Grace sleeping in the crib and stared at her bank balance on her phone. $320,000.47. She'd had 47 cents in her account before the deposit. Now she had more money than most people made in 10 years. And according to Angela, there was more coming. April 2nd. Grace was 3 weeks old. Sarah was feeding her daughter in the kitchen when someone knocked on the door. Hard, insistent, the kind of knock that expected to be answered. She set Grace in the portable bassinet and walked to the door, her heart already beating faster. Through the grimy window, she saw a face she'd hoped never to see again. Tyler. He looked different. Thinner. Darker circles under his eyes. His clothes were wrinkled like he'd been sleeping in them, but his smile was the same, that charming, confident smile that had fooled her for 2 years. "Hey, babe," he said when she opened the door. "Miss me?" Sarah's blood went cold. "What are you doing here?" "Came to see my daughter. I have rights, you know." "You gave up your rights when you walked out, when you shoved me to the ground and told me we never happened." "I was confused, scared. I didn't know what I was doing." Tyler stepped closer. "But I've had time to think. I want to be part of her life. Part of your life." "No?" "Sarah, come on. Let's talk about this. I know I made mistakes, but how did you find me?" Tyler's smile flickered. Just for a second. "What do you mean?" "I mean, how did you know where I was? You left for Florida 3 months ago. You didn't leave a forwarding address. You didn't answer any of my messages." Sarah's eyes narrowed. "So how did you know I was here?" "People talk. I heard you bought some property." "People talk." Sarah nodded slowly. "What else did you hear?" Tyler's face changed, the mask slipping. "I heard you came into some money, some kind of inheritance or something." And there it was, the real reason he'd come back. Not for Grace, not for Sarah, for the money. "Get off my property," Sarah said. "Our property. I'm the father of your child. That gives me rights." "You're not on the birth certificate. You haven't paid a penny in child support. You have no rights here." Tyler's smile disappeared completely. "I'll get a lawyer. I'll sue for custody. I'll drag this through the courts until you've spent every cent you have fighting me." Sarah felt fear crawling up her spine, but she didn't let it show. "Try it," she said. "I have a lawyer too, a good one. And I have documentation of everything you did, every text message where you said you didn't want the baby, every voicemail where you told me to handle it on my own." She stepped closer, her voice dropping. "You want to go to court? Let's go. But I promise you, Tyler, by the time we're done, you'll wish you'd stayed in Florida." Tyler stared at her. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then he laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "You've changed," he said. "You used to be so easy to push around." "People change when they have something worth fighting for." Tyler turned and walked back to his car, a rental Sarah noticed, which meant he'd flown here specifically for this. Specifically because he'd heard about the money. "This isn't over?" he called back. "I'll be seeing you, Sarah." He drove away. Sarah watched until his taillights disappeared, then went inside and locked every door and window. Her hands were shaking. Her whole body was shaking. Grace was crying in her bassinet, sensing her mother's distress. Sarah picked up her daughter and held her close. "It's okay," she whispered. "He's not going to take you. He's not going to take anything from us." But even as she said the words, she wasn't sure she believed them. She called Angela the next morning, April 3rd. "Tyler came to the house. He's threatening to sue for custody." Angela was quiet for a moment. "Does he have any legal standing?" "He's not on the birth certificate. He hasn't provided any support. He explicitly stated he didn't want the baby before he left." "Do you have proof of that?" "Text messages, voicemails, everything he sent me before he disappeared." "Good. Forward all of it to me. I'll have my associate pull together a file." Angela paused. "Sarah, this is important. Has he made any direct threats? Anything that could be considered harassment or intimidation?" Sarah thought about the way Tyler had looked at her, the coldness in his eyes, the anger beneath the smile. "He said this isn't over. He said he'd be seeing me. That's not explicitly threatening, but it's concerning. I want you to document everything from now on, every contact, every attempt at communication. If he shows up again, call the police." "The police won't do anything. He hasn't broken any laws." "Maybe not, but there will be a record. And records matter when you're building a case." Angela's voice softened. "You're not alone in this, Sarah. We're going to protect you and Grace. But you need to be careful." After the call, Sarah sat in the kitchen and tried to think. Tyler had found her somehow. Found out about the money. Which meant someone had talked. Someone who knew about her situation had spread the word until it reached a man in Florida who saw an opportunity, but who, she thought about the people who knew. Maria, who'd helped her fix the house. Mr. Patterson, who'd connected her with Angela. Rosie and the other waitresses at the diner. The bank teller who'd processed her deposit. Any of them could have mentioned something to someone. Small towns were like that. Information traveled fast, especially when it was interesting. Sarah looked at Eleanor's letter on the wall. "Hide help where pride can't touch it," she read aloud. Maybe she needed to start hiding other things too. April 10th, 1 week since Tyler's visit. Sarah was at the diner for her part-time shift she'd cut back to 3 mornings a week now that she had Grace to care for when Dennis Hartley walked in. He looked exactly the same as the last time she'd seen him. Same greasy hair, same predatory smile, same way of standing too close that made her skin crawl. "Well, well," Dennis said, sliding into a booth in her section. "Look who's still working for tips. I thought you'd be living the high life by now." Sarah kept her face neutral. "What can I get you?" "Coffee, black." His eyes traveled over her body in a way that made her want to shower. "I hear you came into some money. Bought that old dump on Persimmon Lane and found a treasure or something." "I don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you don't?" Dennis leaned back. "Thing is, I've been thinking. You remember how I offered to help you out when you were desperate, offered to reduce your rent, work out an arrangement?" Sarah's stomach turned. "I remember. And you turned me down, pretty rudely as I recall, made me feel like some kind of criminal for trying to help." Dennis's smile widened. "But now you've got money. Now you're somebody. So I'm thinking maybe you owe me an apology. Maybe you owe me something for all the trouble you caused." Sarah set down her notepad. "The only thing I owe you is a cup of coffee, which will cost you $2.75. You think you're better than me now, just because you got lucky? I think I was always better than you. I just didn't have the resources to prove it." Sarah met his eyes without flinching. "Pay for your coffee and leave. And if you ever come near me or my daughter again, I'll file a harassment complaint so fast your head will spin." Dennis's face went red. For a moment, she thought he might actually do something, grab her, hit her, make a scene. Instead, he threw a $5 bill on the table and stood up. "You'll regret this," he said quietly. "People like you don't get to talk to people like me that way, not without consequences." He walked out. Sarah watched him go, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. Rosie appeared at her elbow. What did that piece of garbage want? "To remind me that having money doesn't make the wolves go away. It just changes the type of wolves." Rosie put her arm around Sarah's shoulders. "You need anything you call me, day or night. I've got a shotgun and I know how to use it." Sarah laughed, despite herself. "I might take you up on that." April 15th, tax day. Angela called with news about the second settlement. Southeastern wants to negotiate. They're not disputing the validity of the mineral rights. They know they'll lose that fight, but they're trying to minimize the payout. How much are they offering for $400,000, down from the $700 we estimated? Sarah felt her jaw tighten. That's almost half. I know. They're claiming some of the extraction records are incomplete, that they can't verify the full amount we calculated. Angela paused. We can fight this, take it to court, but that would mean months of legal proceedings, and there's no guarantee we'd win. What do you think I should do? Honestly, I think $400,000 is still life-changing money. Combined with what you already have, you'd be looking at over $700,000 total. That's college funds, retirement savings, financial security for you and Grace. Angela sighed. Sometimes the smart move is to take the sure thing instead of gambling on more. Sarah thought about it. $400,000. Plus the $320,000 she already had. Plus the ongoing royalties from the lease agreement. It was more money than she'd ever dreamed of having. More than enough to give Grace everything she needed. But it wasn't what she was owed. It wasn't fair. What would Eleanor do? Sarah asked. What? Eleanor Patterson, the woman who hid these documents, the woman who fought her whole life to build something that would last. Sarah looked at the letter on her wall. What would she do? Angela was quiet for a long moment. She'd fight, Angela said finally. She'd fight until she got every penny she deserved or until she had nothing left to fight with. Then that's what I'll do. Tell Southeastern we're not accepting their offer. Tell them we'll see them in court. Sarah, are you sure this could take months, years even? I'm sure. Grace is going to grow up knowing that her mother didn't back down when things got hard, that she didn't let anyone cheat her out of what was rightfully hers. Sarah took a breath. That's worth more than any settlement. April 22nd, the lawsuit was filed. Angela had warned her it would get ugly. She hadn't been prepared for how ugly. Southeastern's lawyers came out swinging. They filed motions to dismiss. They challenged the authenticity of James Patterson's documents. They hired experts to question the mineral surveys, the extraction records, the chain of ownership. And they started digging into Sarah's personal life. They're trying to discredit you, Angela explained during one of their strategy meetings. If they can paint you as unstable, unreliable, someone who would forge documents or lie about their claims, they can undermine the whole case. I haven't forged anything. I haven't lied about anything. I know that, but they're going to twist everything they can find. Your homelessness, your relationship with Tyler, the fact that you bought the house at a government auction instead of through normal channels. Angela's face was grim. They're going to try to make you look like a con artist who stumbled onto these documents and invented a story to cash in. Sarah felt sick. What do I do? You stay calm. You don't react to their provocations. You let me handle the legal stuff while you focus on being a good mother. Angela paused. And you prepare yourself for the possibility that this gets public. Southeastern might try to take this to the media, make you the villain in a story about fraudulent claims and corporate victims. They would do that even if they know they're wrong. They would do anything to protect their bottom line. That's how corporations work. They don't care about right or wrong. They care about money. Sarah went home that night feeling like the walls were closing in. She had Tyler threatening custody battles. She had Dennis making vague threats about consequences. She had a billion-dollar corporation trying to destroy her reputation, and she had a newborn daughter who needed her to hold it together. She fed Grace and put her to bed, then sat in the kitchen with a cup of tea that went cold while she stared at nothing. How had everything gotten so complicated? A month ago she'd been celebrating. She'd won. She'd beaten the system, found the treasure, secured her daughter's future. Now she was fighting on 3 fronts against enemies who had more resources, more connections, more power than she could ever hope to match. A knock at the door made her jump. She looked at the clock. 9 p.m.? Too late for casual visitors. Her heart racing, she approached the door and peered through the window. Mr. Patterson stood on her porch, leaning on his cane, looking older than she'd ever seen him. She opened the door. Mr. Patterson, what are you doing here? I heard about the lawsuit, and I heard about Tyler coming around. His voice was gruff, but his eyes were kind. I figured you could use some company. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. I could use a lot of things. Then let me in and we'll figure out what we can do. They sat at the kitchen table while Sarah told him everything. The settlement offer, the lawsuit, Tyler's threats, Dennis's harassment, the feeling that no matter how hard she fought the world was determined to beat her down. Mr. Patterson listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, You know what my Aunt Eleanor used to say? What? She used to say that the hardest part of winning isn't the fight, it's what comes after, when everyone who watched you struggle suddenly wants a piece of what you built. He met her eyes. You're not being punished for succeeding, Sarah. You're being tested to see if you deserve to keep what you've earned. I'm so tired of being tested. I know, but tired doesn't mean finished. He reached across the table and took her hand. You've got something those people will never have. You've got Eleanor's stubbornness. You've got James's patience. You've got a daughter who's depending on you to show her what strength looks like. I don't feel strong. Strength isn't a feeling. It's a choice you make every morning when you get out of bed and decide to keep going. Mr. Patterson squeezed her hand. You've made that choice every day since I've known you. Don't stop now. After he left, Sarah stood in front of Eleanor's letter for a long time. Is this what you meant? She asked the empty room. When you said to fight for what's mine, did you know it would be this hard? The letter didn't answer, but somehow just looking at Eleanor's careful handwriting made Sarah feel less alone. May 3rd. Grace was 7 weeks old. The first newspaper article appeared. Woman claims $1 million inheritance from abandoned property. The headline read, Experts question authenticity of decades-old documents. Sarah read the article with shaking hands. It painted her as a desperate single mother who'd stumbled onto some old papers and invented an elaborate scheme to extort money from a reputable mining company. It quoted legal experts who cast doubt on the validity of mineral rights transfers from the 1970s. It mentioned her homelessness without context, making it sound like evidence of instability rather than circumstance. Her phone started ringing within an hour of the article going online. Unknown numbers, blocked callers. People who'd somehow gotten her contact information and wanted to weigh in on whether she was a hero or a fraud. She turned off her phone and held Grace close, trying to block out the noise. Maria arrived at noon. I saw the article, she said, her face dark with anger. It's garbage. Anyone who knows you knows it's garbage. But the people who don't know me don't know that. They just see what Southeastern wants them to see. Then we fight back. We tell your side of the story. How I don't have access to newspapers, I don't have a PR team. You have something better. Maria sat down across from her. You have the truth, and you have people who believe in you. People like who? Like me, like Rosie, like Mr. Patterson. Maria leaned forward. Like everyone at the diner who's watched you work yourself to the bone for 3 years. Like the customers who've seen you show up every day with a smile even when your life was falling apart. That's not enough to fight a corporation. Maybe not, but it's a start. May 10th. Angela called with unexpected news. Southeastern's lead attorney just quit the case. Sarah nearly dropped her phone. What? He resigned this morning. No explanation, but my sources say he had a crisis of conscience. Apparently, he did some digging into the documents and realized his client was on the wrong side of this fight. What does that mean for us? It means they're scrambling. They need to bring in new counsel, get them up to speed, probably delay the proceedings. Angela's voice was cautious. It's good news, Sarah, but don't celebrate yet. Corporations like Southeastern have deep pockets. They'll find another shark to represent them. But it shows they're not invincible. No, it shows that sometimes, even in the ugliest fights, the truth finds a way to surface. Angela paused. There's something else. The attorney who quit, he's willing to give a statement. Off the record, nothing that can be used in court. But he wants to talk to you. To me, why? I don't know, but I think you should meet with him. The attorney's name was Robert Chen. He was 53 years old, had worked for Southeastern's legal team for 8 years, and had never once questioned what he was being asked to do. Until now. They met at a coffee shop in the next county on May 12th. Sarah brought Grace in her carrier. Robert looked at the baby for a long moment before speaking. I have a daughter, he said. She's 22 now, in law school, believe it or not. He shook his head. When I started this case, I saw you as an adversary, someone trying to take money from my client. That's how they framed it. And now I've seen the documents, the real ones, not the summaries my bosses showed me. Robert met her eyes. James Patterson was meticulous. Every purchase, every agreement, every signature, it's all documented. He spent 30 years building something that nobody knew about, and he did it legally, carefully, perfectly. So why did Southeastern fight so hard? Because they knew. They've known for years that there might be valid claims against their extraction rights, but they figured nobody would ever come forward. The properties were abandoned. The families had scattered. The paper trail was so complicated that anyone who tried to trace it would give up. Robert's voice was bitter. They didn't count on someone actually finding what Patterson hid. Why are you telling me this? Because I can't do it anymore. I can't help a company cheat a single mother out of money that's rightfully hers. He pulled an envelope from his jacket and slid it across the table. This is everything I know about Southeastern's internal discussions of your case. The emails where they admitted the documents were probably valid. The memos where they strategized about how to discredit you in the press. Sarah stared at the envelope. Is this legal? Probably not. I could be disbarred for giving it to you. I definitely violated about a dozen confidentiality agreements. Robert stood up. But some things are more important than career advancement. Eleanor Patterson knew that. So did James. And I think you know it too. He walked out of the coffee shop without looking back. Sarah opened the envelope with trembling hands. Inside were printouts of emails, internal memos, corporate communications that laid bare exactly what Southeastern had been doing and why. They knew the claims were valid. They'd known from the beginning, and they'd chosen to fight anyway, hoping that Sarah would run out of money or energy or will before they had to admit the truth. She called Angela immediately. I have something you need to see. May 18th. The tide began to turn. Angela filed the leaked documents with the court along with a motion to sanction Southeastern for withholding evidence. The judge, a woman in her 60s who'd seen every corporate trick in the book, was not amused. This is exactly the kind of behavior that gives big business a bad name, she said from the bench. Southeastern Resource Partners, you are hereby ordered to provide full and complete disclosure of all documents related to this case. Any further attempts at obstruction will result in summary judgment for the plaintiff. Outside the courthouse, reporters were waiting. Sarah hadn't expected them, hadn't prepared a statement, but they were there, microphones out, cameras rolling, shouting questions. Ms. Mitchell, how do you respond to accusations that your claims are fraudulent? Ms. Mitchell, is it true that Southeastern offered you $400,000 to settle? Ms. Mitchell, what message do you have for other people fighting against big corporations? Sarah looked at the reporters, then at Angela, then at Grace, sleeping peacefully in her carrier. She stepped up to the microphones. My name is Sarah Mitchell. 7 months ago, I was homeless and pregnant, sleeping in my car because I couldn't afford rent. I bought a condemned house for $1 because it was better than nothing. And under the floorboards of that house, I found documents that a woman named Eleanor Patterson had hidden decades ago. She took a breath. Eleanor believed that someday someone would come along who needed what she'd saved, someone desperate enough to take a chance on something everyone else had given up on. I was that person, and I've been fighting ever since to claim what Eleanor left for me. The reporters were silent, listening. Southeastern Resource Partners has tried to cheat me. They've tried to discredit me. They've tried to make me look like a con artist instead of a mother fighting for her daughter's future. Sarah's voice grew stronger. But the truth is coming out, and no amount of money or lawyers or PR campaigns can stop it. What do you want from Southeastern? Someone shouted. I want what I'm owed, every penny, and I want them to admit what they did not just to me, but to everyone else they've cheated over the years. Sarah looked directly into the nearest camera. This isn't just about money, it's about whether corporations get to bulldoze ordinary people and call it business. I'm here to say they don't, not anymore. The story went viral. Within 24 hours, Sarah's statement had been viewed over 2 million times. News networks picked it up. Social media exploded with #Justice for Sarah hashtags. People started sharing their own stories of fighting against corporations and being crushed. And then other claimants started coming forward. May 25th. Angela called her voice excited in a way Sarah had never heard before. We've got company. 3 other families have contacted me with similar claims against Southeastern. Mineral rights they didn't know they had. Documents that were overlooked or suppressed. Royalties that were never paid. Other families. James Patterson wasn't the only one who bought land in that area. There were others like him, working-class people who scraped together enough to buy property nobody wanted. Some of them separated the mineral rights too. And when those people died, their heirs never knew what they were owed. What does this mean? It means we're not fighting alone anymore. It means Southeastern is facing potential liability that's much bigger than your case alone, and it means they're going to be very, very motivated to settle. May 30th. The call came while Sarah was feeding Grace. They want to meet, Angela said. Tomorrow, in person. Their CEO is flying in from Houston. Their CEO, Harrison Drake, he took over the company 5 years ago. From what I hear, he's furious about how this has been handled. He wants to make it right. Do you believe him? I believe he wants this story out of the headlines. Whether that translates to actually doing the right thing, we'll find out tomorrow. The meeting took place in a conference room at a downtown hotel. June 1st. Harrison Drake was not what Sarah expected. He was younger than she'd imagined, maybe mid-40s, with gray at his temples and tired eyes that suggested he hadn't slept well in weeks. He shook her hand with surprising warmth. "Ms. Mitchell, thank you for agreeing to meet." "I'm not sure I had a choice. Your company has been trying to destroy me for the past 2 months." Drake winced. "I know, and I'm not going to make excuses for what happened. The legal team that handled your case made decisions that were ethically and legally indefensible. They've been terminated. All of them. Everyone involved in the strategy to discredit you, everyone who knew about the document suppression and didn't speak up." He met her eyes. "I know that doesn't undo the damage, but I want you to understand that this isn't who we are. Not anymore." Sarah glanced at Angela, who gave a small nod. "What are you offering?" Sarah asked. "Full payment of all outstanding royalties, $700,000 as originally calculated, plus a new lease agreement at 20% with the terms your attorney requested, plus a public apology acknowledging that Southeastern acted improperly and that your claims were always legitimate." Sarah waited. "And..." Drake raised an eyebrow. "And... you said there are other families with similar claims. What about them?" "We're prepared to negotiate with all legitimate claimants. Anyone who can demonstrate valid mineral rights will receive fair compensation." "Define fair." "Whatever they're owed, without fighting, without litigation, without trying to wear them down." Drake leaned forward. "I took this job because I believed I could make Southeastern a company that did things the right way. I've failed at that so far, but I'm trying to fix it." Sarah studied his face, looking for deception. She'd gotten good at spotting it after Tyler, after Dennis, after all the people who'd tried to use her. She didn't see deception in Harrison Drake. She saw exhaustion, frustration, maybe even genuine remorse. "I want one more thing," she said. "Name it." "A scholarship fund, in Eleanor Patterson's name, for single mothers trying to get education or job training, funded by Southeastern in perpetuity." Drake blinked. That wasn't on the table." "It is now. Eleanor saved my life. I want to make sure other women get the same chance." The room was silent. Angela looked like she was trying not to smile. Finally, Drake nodded. "Agreed." "The Eleanor Patterson Scholarship Fund. I'll have the paperwork drawn up this week." Sarah extended her hand. "Then we have a deal." They shook, and just like that, months of fighting fear and uncertainty came to an end. Outside the hotel, Sarah held Grace close and let herself breathe for the first time in what felt like forever. "You did it," Angela said. "You actually did it." "We did it, all of us." Sarah looked at her daughter's sleeping face. "And Eleanor. She started this 60 years ago. We just finished what she started." "What now?" Sarah thought about the tiny house on Persimmon Lane, the letter still hanging on the kitchen wall, the floorboards where she'd found the metal box. "Now I go home," she said, "and I start building something worth leaving behind." June 5th. Mr. Patterson was waiting on her porch when she got home from signing the final settlement papers. "I heard the news," he said, his weathered face breaking into a smile. "All $700,000 plus the scholarship fund plus a public apology that ran in 3 newspapers." Sarah sat down beside him. "It's over. It's finally over." "Is it?" Mr. Patterson raised an eyebrow. "The money's over. The lawsuit's over, but the life that comes after, that's just beginning." Sarah looked out at the land that stretched behind her tiny house. 43 acres that belonged to her. Minerals worth a fortune, a future she couldn't have imagined a year ago. "What am I supposed to do now?" she asked. "I've spent so long fighting to survive that I don't know how to do anything else." "You learn, the same way Eleanor and James learned, the same way I learned after my wife passed." Mr. Patterson put his hand on her shoulder. "You wake up every day and you choose to keep going, not because you have to, because you want to." Grace started crying inside the house. Sarah stood up to go to her. "Mr. Patterson." "Yes." "Thank you for everything, for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself." The old man smiled. "You believed in yourself plenty. You just needed someone to remind you." Sarah went inside and picked up her daughter. She stood in the kitchen, rocking Grace gently, looking at Eleanor's letter on the wall. "We made it," she whispered. "Against everyone who said we couldn't, we made it." The tiny house was quiet. The land was peaceful, And somewhere Sarah liked to think Eleanor and James Patterson were finally at rest. Their legacy was safe. Their secret had found the person it was meant for. And Sarah Mitchell, the pregnant woman who'd bought a worthless house for $1 while everyone laughed, had proven them all wrong. 3 months after the settlement, Sarah still woke up every morning expecting something to go wrong. She would open her eyes in the darkness of the tiny house, listen to Grace breathing in the crib beside her bed, and wait for the panic to set in. Wait for the moment when she remembered they were still homeless, still hungry, still fighting for survival. It took a long time for her body to understand that the fight was over. September 8th. Grace was 6 months old. Sarah sat at the kitchen table with a calculator and a notebook trying to make sense of numbers that still didn't feel real. $700,000 from the second settlement, $320,000 from the first. Monthly royalty payments that had already started coming in $4,200 last month alone. Over $1 million. She had over $1 million, and she had no idea what to do with it. The phone rang. Angela's name flashed on the screen. "How are you adjusting?" Angela asked. "I'm not. I still check my bank balance 3 times a day to make sure the money's real." "That's normal. It takes time to stop thinking like someone who's broke." Angela paused. "I'm calling because I have an update on the scholarship fund. Southeastern finalized the paperwork this week. The Eleanor Patterson Scholarship Fund is officially operational." Sarah closed her eyes. "How much did they put in?" $200,000 to start. And they've committed to $50,000 annually for the next 10 years. That's $700,000 total. Which means dozens of women are going to get the help Eleanor wanted to give. Because of you, Sarah. After the call, Sarah walked to the kitchen wall where Eleanor's letter hung in its frame. She'd read those words so many times she knew them by heart, but she read them again anyway. "What you're holding isn't charity. It's inheritance from one survivor to another." Sarah traced the letters with her finger. "I hope I'm doing this right," she whispered. "I hope I'm being what you wanted." Grace cooed from her playpen, reaching toward the sunlight streaming through the window. Sarah picked up her daughter and held her close. "Your great-great-aunt Eleanor saved us," she said. "And now we're going to help save other people. That's what family does. That's what this family does." October 15th. Maria arrived at the tiny house with a pickup truck full of lumber. "What's all this?" Sarah asked, watching Maria unload planks and power tools. "We're building a deck, a real one, not those cinder blocks you've been using as a porch." Maria handed Sarah a hammer. "You've got the money now. Time to make this place into something proper. I could hire contractors." "You could, but then you wouldn't learn anything." Maria's eyes were sharp. "Money can buy you comfort, Sarah. It can't buy you capability that you have to earn." They worked together for 3 weekends building a deck that wrapped around the front of the tiny house. Maria taught Sarah how to measure and cut, how to drive screws at the right angle, how to level boards so they wouldn't wobble. It was hard work. Sarah's muscles ached. Her hands blistered. But when they finished, she stood on the deck she'd helped build and felt something she hadn't expected. Pride. Real pride. The kind that came from making something with your own hands. "Not bad," Maria said, surveying their work. "Not professional quality, but solid. It'll last 20 years if you maintain it." "Thank you for teaching me." "Thank me by teaching someone else someday." Maria picked up her tools. "That's how it works. Knowledge passes down. That's Eleanor's real legacy, not the money. The knowledge that you can build something from nothing if you're willing to work." November 3rd. The first Eleanor Patterson Scholarship was awarded to a woman named Jennifer Torres. Sarah drove to the community college for the ceremony, Grace strapped into her car seat, nervous in a way she hadn't expected. She wasn't giving a speech. Angela had arranged for a representative from Southeastern to handle the official remarks. But she'd been asked to present the check. Jennifer was 24 years old, single mother of 2, working nights at a grocery store while studying for her nursing degree. When Sarah handed her the envelope containing $10,000, Jennifer started to cry. "I don't know what to say," Jennifer managed. "I was going to drop out next semester. I couldn't afford childcare and tuition. I was going to have to choose." "You don't have to choose anymore." "But why? Why me? You don't even know me." Sarah looked at this woman, exhausted, overwhelmed, determined, and saw herself. Saw who she'd been a year ago, before the tiny house, before the documents, before everything changed. "Someone helped me when I had nothing," Sarah said. "A woman I never met who believed that someday I would come along and need what she'd saved. I'm just passing it forward." Jennifer hugged her, hard. and Sarah felt something unlock in her chest, something that had been waiting for this moment to release. This was why. This was what the money was for. Not just to change her own life, but to change other lives too. November 20th, 2 days before Thanksgiving. Tyler came back. Sarah was at the grocery store loading bags into her car while Grace sat in the shopping cart when she heard his voice behind her. "Hey, Sarah." She spun around. Tyler was standing 10 feet away, hands in his pockets, looking somehow worse than the last time she'd seen him. Thinner, paler, dark circles under his eyes that suggested he wasn't sleeping well. "What do you want? To talk. That's all. Just to talk." "We have nothing to talk about." "Please." His voice cracked. "I know I don't deserve anything from you. I know I messed up, but I've been thinking a lot about what I did, and I need to say some things." Sarah looked at her daughter. Grace was watching Tyler with curious eyes, unaware that this man was her father, unaware of everything he'd done. 5 minutes, Sarah said, "in the parking lot, where there are witnesses." They stood beside her car while Grace played with a set of plastic keys, oblivious to the tension between the adults. "I was wrong," Tyler said. "I was scared and selfish, and I handled everything wrong. I shouldn't have left. I shouldn't have said those things. I definitely shouldn't have come back trying to get money from you." "Is this supposed to be an apology?" "It's supposed to be the truth." He looked at Grace. "She's beautiful. She looks like you." "Don't." "I'm not asking for anything, I swear. I'm not here for money or custody or any of that. I just..." He trailed off, struggling for words. "I saw the news stories, what you went through, how you fought, and I realized what a coward I was." Sarah felt anger rising in her chest. "You pushed me. I was 7 months pregnant, and you pushed me to the ground. I could have lost her." "I know. You told me we never happened. You told me to rot." "I know. And now you want to apologize. Now after everything," Tyler's eyes were wet. "I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I just needed you to know that I know how wrong I was. That I'm not going to bother you anymore." He took a step back. "She's lucky to have you as her mother. I hope she knows that someday." He walked away. Sarah watched him go, waiting for the satisfaction of seeing him broken, waiting for the vindication she'd imagined for months. It didn't come. Instead, she felt something else. Not forgiveness, not yet, maybe not ever, but something like release, like a chain she'd been carrying had finally fallen away. "Goodbye, Tyler," she said quietly, knowing he couldn't hear her. Then she loaded Grace into the car and drove home to the tiny house that had saved them both. December 25th, Christmas Day. The tiny house had never had a real Christmas before. Sarah put up a tree, small artificial decorated with ornaments from the dollar store. She strung lights around the deck Maria had helped her build. She hung a wreath on the door that Eleanor and James had walked through decades ago. The guest list was small but perfect. Maria and her grandchildren. Mr. Patterson, who arrived with presents wrapped in newspaper and a smile that transformed his weathered face. Rosie, who brought enough food to feed an army and refused to let anyone help in the kitchen. Grace sat in the middle of the living room, surrounded by wrapping paper and toys, completely overwhelmed by the attention. "She's going to be spoiled rotten," Maria said, while watching Grace tear into another present. "She deserves it. She spent her first month of life in a condemned house with no heat." "That wasn't her fault." "No, it was mine." Sarah watched her daughter. "But I'm going to spend the rest of my life making it up to her." Mr. Patterson appeared at her elbow. "Can I talk to you outside?" They stepped onto the deck, breath misting in the cold December air. The old man looked out at the land stretching behind the house, his expression thoughtful. "I've been meaning to tell you something," he said, "about Aunt Eleanor." "What about her?" "Before she died, she gave me a letter, told me to give it to whoever found the house worth saving. I forgot about it for years, thought it was just another piece of her sentimentality, but after you found the documents, I went looking for it." He pulled an envelope from his coat. "Found it last week, in a box I haven't opened since she passed." Sarah's hands were shaking as she took the envelope. Different handwriting than the letter in the metal box. Shakier. Older. "Should I read it now?" "That's up to you." Sarah opened the envelope and unfolded the paper inside. "My dearest family," the letter began. "If you're reading this, then Tom has found you, and the house has done what I always hoped it would do. I wanted to write one more thing, something I couldn't put in the other letter because it was too private, too personal. When James and I built that house, we had nothing. Less than nothing. We were two broken people from broken families trying to make something whole. Everybody said we'd fail. Everybody said the land was worthless, the house was too small, the dream was too big. They were wrong. They were wrong because they measured success by the wrong things. They looked at size and money and status. We looked at love and persistence and faith. The house isn't valuable because of what's in it. It's valuable because of what it represents. The belief that two people with nothing can build something that lasts. The proof that survival isn't just possible, it's beautiful. To whoever reads this, you are the heir to that belief. Not just the money or the property, but the stubborn, wonderful insistence that life can be good even when it starts out hard. Make something beautiful, leave something behind, and always, always remember that you were worth saving. With all my love, Eleanor Grace Patterson, October 2005, Sarah finished reading and realized she was crying. Not sad tears. Grateful tears. Overwhelmed tears. She wrote this 4 years after the first letter, Mr. Patterson said. She must have been worried the first one wasn't enough. That she needed to say more. It's perfect. It's exactly what I needed to hear. She had a gift for that, knowing what people needed before they knew it themselves. Sarah looked at the letter, at Eleanor's shaky handwriting, at the words that felt like a blessing from beyond the grave. I'm going to frame this one too, she said, right next to the first one, so Grace can see them both when she's old enough to understand. She'll understand, Mr. Patterson said. She's got her mother's eyes, sharp, stubborn. She'll understand plenty. January 15th, the new year. Sarah enrolled in online classes at the community college. She'd been thinking about it for months, ever since Maria had talked about knowledge being Eleanor's real legacy. The money gave her security, but it didn't give her purpose. It didn't give her something to work toward. Accounting, she decided. She was good with numbers. She'd spent years balancing tips and bills and rent and survival. Now she could turn that into something real. The first class was harder than she expected. The professor assigned readings she didn't understand and homework that took hours to complete. Sarah stayed up late studying while Grace slept, fighting through frustration and self-doubt. You don't have to do this, what Maria said during one of her visits. You've got enough money to live on forever. I know, that's not why I'm doing it. Then why? Sarah looked at the textbook, spread open on her kitchen table. Because Grace is going to ask me someday what I did with my life, and I want to have an answer that means something. I don't want to be the woman who got lucky and then just stopped. I want to be someone she can be proud of. She'll be proud of you no matter what. You're her mother. I want to give her more than that. I want to give her an example. February 20th. The second scholarship ceremony was different from the first. This time, Sarah gave the speech. She stood at the podium in the community college auditorium looking out at a crowd of women who'd applied for the Eleanor Patterson Scholarship. Some of them would receive funding today. All of them were fighting the same battles Sarah had fought. 2 years ago, I was sleeping in my car, Sarah began. I was pregnant alone and convinced that I'd never amount to anything. Every day was about survival. Every decision was about making it to tomorrow. The room was silent, listening. Then I bought a house for $1, a house that everyone said was worthless. And inside that house, I found a letter from a woman named Eleanor Patterson, a woman I'd never met, a woman who died years before I was born. Sarah paused, gathering herself. Eleanor didn't know my name. She didn't know I existed, but she knew someone like me would come along. Someone desperate enough to take a chance on something everyone else had given up on, and she left help where I would find it. She looked at the women in the audience, saw herself in their tired eyes, their determined faces, their refusal to give up. This scholarship isn't about money. Money helps, but it's not the point. The point is that someone believes in you. Someone sees your struggle and says, you're worth investing in, you're worth helping, you're worth saving. Sarah's voice broke, but she kept going. Eleanor saved me. Now I want to help save you. Not because I'm generous or special or better than anyone else, but because that's what survivors do. We reach back and pull other people forward. She stepped away from the podium. The applause was overwhelming. After the ceremony, a woman approached her, young, maybe 20, with a baby on her hip and fear in her eyes. I didn't get the scholarship, the woman said. I wasn't selected. I'm sorry, there were so many applicants. I know, it's okay. I just wanted to tell you your speech, what you said about being worth saving. The woman's voice trembled. I needed to hear that. I've been telling myself for months that I'm not worth anything. that my son would be better off without me. Sarah felt her heart clench. That's not true. I'm starting to believe that, because of what you said. The woman wiped her eyes. Thank you. Thank you for telling your story. Sarah watched her walk away, holding her son close, and felt the weight of what she'd done. Not the money, not the settlement, not the legal victory. This. Reaching one person who needed to hear that survival was possible. That was Eleanor's real legacy. March 8th, Grace's first birthday. Sarah threw a party in the tiny house. It was too small for the number of people who came. Maria and her family. Mr. Patterson and his nephew Rosie and half the diner staff, Angela and her wife neighbors from down the road who'd watched the tiny house transform over the past year. Grace sat in a high chair, surrounded by presents, her face covered in chocolate cake frosting. Speech, someone called out. Give a speech, Sarah, Sarah laughed. It's a baby's birthday party. Nobody needs a speech. We do, Maria shouted. Tell us what you're thankful for. Sarah looked around at the people crammed into her tiny house. The people who'd believed in her when she couldn't believe in herself. The people who'd helped her build something from nothing. 1 year ago today, I was in the hospital giving birth to this beautiful girl, she said. I was terrified. I had just won a lawsuit, I had money coming in, but I had no idea how to be a mother. No idea how to be anything except a survivor. She looked at Grace, who was happily smashing cake with her fists. But I figured it out. With help. So much help. From Maria, who taught me how to build things. From Mr. Patterson, who connected me to my family's past. From Rosie, who fed me when I was hungry and employed me when I had nothing. From Angela, who fought for me when I couldn't fight for myself. Her voice caught. A year ago, I thought I was alone. I thought I had to do everything by myself, because that's what survival meant. But I was wrong. Survival isn't about doing it alone. It's about letting people in, letting them help, trusting that you're worth helping. She raised her glass of sparkling cider. To Grace, to Eleanor, and to everyone who refuses to give up on the people they love. To Grace and Eleanor, the room echoed. Grace, having no idea what was happening, threw a handful of cake into the air. Everyone laughed, and Sarah thought, this is what happiness feels like. I almost forgot. April 22nd. Mr. Patterson had a stroke. Sarah got the call at 3 a.m. She dressed in the dark, left Grace with Maria, and drove to the hospital as fast as she could legally go. He was unconscious when she arrived. The doctors said the next 24 hours would be critical. Sarah sat in the chair beside his bed, holding his weathered hand, praying to a God she wasn't sure she believed in anymore. You can't leave yet, she whispered. Grace doesn't even know you properly. She calls you Papa Tom. She looks for you every time someone knocks on the door. The machines beeped. Mr. Patterson didn't move. You're the closest thing to a grandfather she has. The closest thing to a father I've ever had since my parents died. You can't just leave. The hours crawled by. Maria came and brought coffee. Angela called to check in. Rosie sent food that Sarah couldn't eat. At 7 p.m., almost 16 hours after the stroke, Mr. Patterson opened his eyes. Sarah? His voice was weak, confused. I'm here. I'm right here. What happened? You had a stroke. You scared the hell out of me. Mr. Patterson tried to smile. It came out lopsided, but it was there. Takes more than that to kill a Patterson. We're stubborn folk. You need to rest. I need to tell you something first. He squeezed her hand weakly. In case I don't get another chance. Don't talk like that. Let an old man have his moment. His eyes were serious. You're the best thing that happened to this family in 50 years. Eleanor would have loved you. James would have been proud to call you kin. Sarah felt tears sliding down her face. We're not really related. Blood doesn't make family. Love makes family. Stubbornness makes family. Fighting for each other makes family. He closed his eyes. You're a Patterson now, Sarah, whether you like it or not. He fell asleep. Sarah stayed beside him all night. May 10th. Mr. Patterson came home from the hospital after 3 weeks of rehabilitation. He couldn't walk as well as before. His speech was slower. He needed help with things he used to do himself. But he was alive, and that was what mattered. Sarah visited every day. Brought Grace, who'd learned to say Papa Tom clearly now and demanded to see him constantly. Brought food Maria had cooked. Brought updates about the scholarship fund and the tiny house and all the things Mr. Patterson had helped make possible. You're smothering me, he complained during one visit. I'm not dying. I'm just old. You scared me. I'm allowed to smother you. You've got your own life to live, a daughter to raise, classes to take. Stop spending all your time with an old man who's already had more years than he deserved. Your family, Sarah said simply. Family doesn't abandon each other. Mr. Patterson's eyes went wet. He looked away embarrassed. Eleanor would be proud, he said quietly, of both of us, of what we've built together. We're not done building yet. No, we're not. June 15th. Sarah finished her first year of classes with a 3.8 GPA. She held the transcript in her hands, reading the grades over and over. A's in accounting fundamentals, A's in business math, A- in economics, which she still thought was unfair because the professor had been unreasonable about late assignments. I did it, she told Grace, who was more interested in the Cheerios on her high chair tray. I actually did it. Maria arrived for their weekly dinner with a bottle of champagne. I heard the news. You're officially a college student. I'm officially someone who passed their first year. That's not the same as graduating. It's a start. Everything good starts somewhere. Maria poured 2 glasses. To Sarah Mitchell, former homeless pregnant woman, future accountant, current badass. I'm not a badass. You bought a condemned house for $1, found $1 million inheritance, fought a corporation, won, and finished your first year of college while raising a baby alone. If that's not badass, I don't know what is. Sarah looked at her transcript, at the proof that she could learn, could grow, could become something more than she'd been. Eleanor did this, she said. She gave me the chance. Eleanor gave you resources. You did the rest. Maria raised her glass. Stop giving credit to dead people. You earned this, Sarah. Own it. Sarah clinked her glass against Maria's. To owning it, she said. July 4th, Independence Day. The tiny house hosted its first community barbecue. Sarah had been planning it for weeks. Tables set up on the deck Maria had helped build. Food enough for 30 people, games for the kids. Fireworks visible from the field behind the house. Half the town showed up. People who'd laughed at her when she bought the house. People who'd written articles questioning her claims. People who'd watched from a distance and judged and doubted. They came now because the story had changed. Because Sarah wasn't a desperate pregnant woman anymore. She was a success story, an inspiration. Someone who'd beaten the odds and built something beautiful. Sarah watched them eat her food and play on her land and celebrate on her property, and she didn't feel angry anymore. She felt something else. Something that surprised her. Gratitude. Because without the doubters, she wouldn't have had anything to prove. Without the people who'd laughed, she wouldn't have fought so hard to make them stop. Their cruelty had been fuel. Their disbelief had been motivation. She understood now why Eleanor had hidden the documents instead of giving them away openly. It wasn't just about pride. It was about earning what you received, about proving to yourself and everyone else that you deserved what you'd been given. Sarah had proved it, and now she could let go of the anger and just live. Nice party, someone said beside her. She turned. It was one of the women from the auction, the one who'd laughed the loudest when Sarah bid $1 for the house. Thanks for coming, Sarah said. I owe you an apology for what I said back then. The woman looked uncomfortable. I judged you without knowing your situation. I was cruel. You were. I'm sorry. Sarah considered the apology, weighed it against the memory of standing in that auction room 7 months pregnant being laughed at by strangers. I forgive you, she said finally. But not for your sake, for mine. Carrying anger is too heavy. I've got better things to do with my energy. The woman nodded, looking relieved. Your story is incredible, what you've done with this place. It's not incredible. It's just what happens when you don't give up. Sarah looked at the tiny house lit up with string lights surrounded by people laughing and children playing. Anyone can do this. They just have to be stubborn enough to try. August 30th, late summer. Grace took her first steps. Sarah was in the kitchen washing dishes when she heard Maria gasp from the living room. Sarah, come quick. She ran heart-pounding, expecting disaster. Instead, she found Grace standing in the middle of the room, her chubby hands reaching toward Sarah, her face lit up with triumph. And then Grace walked. 3 steps, 4, before tumbling into Sarah's arms. You did it. Sarah scooped up her daughter, laughing and crying at the same time. You walked? You actually walked. Grace giggled, pleased with herself, already squirming to be put down so she could try again. Maria was recording on her phone. I got it. I got the whole thing. She's going to want to see this when she's older. Sarah watched Grace attempt another few steps, wobbling, determined, refusing to give up despite falling twice. She's got Eleanor's stubbornness, Sarah said. She's got yours, Maria corrected. Eleanor's been dead for 20 years. Whatever stubbornness that girl has, she got from watching her mother fight. Sarah held her daughter close and felt the fullness of everything she'd built. The tiny house that had saved them, the money that had secured their future, the community that had grown around them. But most of all, she felt Grace. This perfect, stubborn, beautiful girl who'd been there through everything, who'd been her reason to keep fighting when giving up would have been so much easier. "I love you," Sarah whispered into Grace's hair, "more than anything in this world, more than any amount of money." Grace responded by grabbing Sarah's nose and laughing. It was the best moment of Sarah's life. Later that night, after Grace was asleep, Sarah stood in front of Eleanor's letters on the wall. 2 frames now. The original letter from the metal box and the second one Mr. Patterson had given her, side by side, written by a woman who died decades before Sarah was born. "I think I understand now," Sarah said to the empty room. "What you were trying to teach me. It wasn't about the money, was it? It was about believing I deserved to be saved, believing I was worth the effort." The letters didn't answer, but Sarah didn't need them to. She knew the truth now, knew it in her bones. Eleanor had planted a seed 60 years ago, a seed of hope hidden in a house that nobody wanted, waiting for someone desperate enough to find it. Sarah had found it, had watered it with her tears and her work and her refusal to give up. And now that seed had grown into something beautiful, a family, a community, a legacy that would continue long after Sarah was gone. She touched Eleanor's signature on the first letter, felt the weight of the history she'd inherited. "Thank you," she whispered, "for believing in someone you'd never meet, for hiding help where pride couldn't touch it, for giving me the chance to become who I was meant to be." Then she turned off the lights and went to bed, ready to face whatever tomorrow would bring. Because that's what survivors did. They faced each day. They kept building. They never stopped believing that tomorrow could be better than today. Eleanor had taught her that. Grace would learn it too. And the tiny house on Persimmon Lane would stand for another generation waiting for whoever might need it next. 5 years passed faster than Sarah ever thought possible. Grace started kindergarten on a Tuesday morning in September, wearing a pink backpack that was almost bigger than she was. Sarah stood at the edge of the schoolyard watching her daughter walk through the doors without looking back and felt something crack open in her chest. "She didn't even wave," Sarah said to Maria, who'd come for moral support. "That means you raised her right, confident, independent, ready for the world." "She's 5. The world can wait." "The world waits for nobody." Maria squeezed her arm. "Come on, let's get coffee. You look like you're about to cry." "I'm not going to cry," Sarah cried. In the coffee shop, surrounded by other parents who were pretending not to do the same thing. 5 years of being Grace's entire world, and now her daughter was starting to build a world of her own. It was terrifying. It was beautiful. It was exactly what Eleanor would have wanted. October 15th, Sarah's 33rd birthday. She graduated from community college with an associate's degree in accounting. Mr. Patterson was there in a wheelchair now, but still sharp-eyed and quick-tongued. Maria brought flowers. Rosie closed the diner early so the whole staff could attend. Grace sat in the front row holding a sign that said, "My mom is the best," in crooked purple letters. "You did it," Angela said after the ceremony, handing Sarah her diploma. "From sleeping in your car to college graduate in 5 years. I had help. You had opportunity. What you did with it was all you." Angela smiled. Eleanor chose well. She always knew it would be someone special. November 3rd. Mr. Patterson called Sarah at 6 a.m. "I need to see you," he said. His voice was strange, urgent. "Today, as soon as you can get here." Sarah dropped Grace at school and drove straight to his house. He was waiting on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, despite the cold, his face more serious than she'd ever seen it. "What's wrong?" she asked, climbing the steps. "Are you sick, Wirt?" "Sit down, Sarah." She sat. Her heart was pounding. "I'm not going to be around much longer," Mr. Patterson said. "Don't argue. I know my body. The doctors have been saying it for months, but now I can feel it. The end is coming." "Tom, let me finish." He held up his hand. "I've lived 86 years. I've seen things I never expected to see. I've watched you turn that tiny house into something Eleanor would have wept over. I'm ready to go." Sarah couldn't speak. Tears were streaming down her face. "But before I go, I need to give you something." He reached into his coat and pulled out an envelope. "I found this last week, in my mother's things. I should have looked through them years ago, but I kept putting it off. You know how it is." Sarah took the envelope with trembling hands. "What is it?" "Open it." Inside was a photograph, old faded black and white. Two women standing in front of the tiny house, their arms around each other, smiling at the camera. "That's Eleanor on the right," Mr. Patterson said. "The woman on the left is my mother, her sister. They were inseparable until my mother got married and moved across the state." Sarah stared at the photograph. Eleanor looked young in it, happy, full of life. "Turn it over," Mr. Patterson said. On the back in faded pencil, Eleanor and Ruth, 1958, the year we promised to always take care of each other. "They made a pact," Mr. Patterson continued, "when they were young, that no matter what happened, they would make sure their families were protected, that no one who came from their blood would ever be alone. But I'm not from their blood. Blood isn't what makes family. Eleanor proved that when she left those documents for a stranger." Mr. Patterson's eyes were wet. "She kept her promise, Sarah. She took care of someone in need, even though she never met them. And now you're doing the same thing with the scholarship fund." Sarah looked at the photograph again, at Eleanor's smile, at the promise of two sisters who'd refused to let the world break them. "Keep it, Mr." Patterson said. "Hang it next to her letters. Let Grace see where she comes from, the line of stubborn women who refuse to give up." Sarah hugged him, carefully because he was fragile now, but fiercely because she needed him to know how much he meant to her. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything, for finding me, for believing in me, for being the family I needed. Thank you for letting an old man be part of something that mattered." He patted her back. "Now go on, live your life. I'll be watching. I'll always be watching." December 22nd. Mr. Patterson died in his sleep. Peaceful, painless. Exactly the way he'd wanted to go. Sarah got the call at midnight. She sat on the edge of her bed in the tiny house, the phone pressed against her ear, and felt something inside her go quiet. Not sad, not exactly. More like the completion of a chapter, the closing of a door that had been open for 5 years. She told Grace in the morning. Her daughter, 5 years old now, old enough to understand death, but young enough to feel it, purely crawled into Sarah's lap and cried. "Papa Tom is gone," Grace asked between sobs. "He's gone, baby, but he loved you so much. He'll always be watching over you. Like Eleanor?" Sarah felt her heart clench. Yes, like Eleanor, like all the people who loved us and left too soon. The funeral was small. Mr. Patterson hadn't wanted anything elaborate. Just family and close friends gathered in the church where he'd been baptized 86 years ago. Sarah gave the eulogy. "Thomas Patterson was the first person who believed in me," she said, looking out at the mourners. "When I bought a condemned house for $1 when everyone in town thought I'd lost my mind, Tom saw something else. He saw possibility. He saw Eleanor's legacy continuing. He saw family." She paused, gathering herself. "He used to tell me that blood doesn't make family. Love makes family. Stubbornness makes family. Fighting for each other makes family." Sarah's voice cracked. "By that definition, Tom Patterson was the best family I ever had." After the service, a lawyer approached her. "Ms. Mitchell, I'm handling Mr. Patterson's estate. He left instructions for you." Instructions. Everything goes to you, his house, his savings, his personal effects. He wanted you to have it all. Sarah stared at the lawyer. "That's not possible. He had other family, his nephew." Mr. Patterson's nephew was consulted. He agreed with the decision. Mr. Patterson was very specific in his wishes. The lawyer handed her an envelope. "He also left this. Said you'd understand?" Sarah opened the envelope later that night, alone in the tiny house while Grace slept. Inside was a single sheet of paper covered in Mr. Patterson's shaky handwriting. "Sarah, you gave me 5 years I didn't expect to have. You gave me a granddaughter I never thought I'd know. You gave me the chance to see Eleanor's dream come true. I don't have much to leave behind, just a house and some savings and an old man's gratitude. But I want you to have it all. Not because you need it, you've proven you can take care of yourself, because you deserve it, because family takes care of family. Use it for Grace, use it for the scholarship fund, use it however you see fit. I trust you completely. Tell Grace I'll be watching her grow up from wherever I end up. Tell her to be stubborn and kind and brave, just like her mother. And tell Eleanor I kept my promise. I found the person she was looking for. With love, Tom." Sarah sat in the kitchen and cried until she had nothing left. Then she hung the letter next to Eleanor's, next to the photograph of two sisters who'd promised to always take care of each other. The wall was getting crowded now. Letters and photos and memories layered on top of each other like geological strata. A history of survival and love and stubbornness that stretched back decades. Grace would inherit all of it someday. would understand where she came from and what she was part of. That was the real treasure. Not the money, not the land, the story, the legacy, the proof that ordinary people could do extraordinary things if they refused to give up. January 5th, a new year. Sarah sold Mr. Patterson's house and put the money into a trust for Grace's education. She kept his personal effects, the photographs, the letters, the small treasures he'd accumulated over 86 years. She went through them slowly, discovering pieces of a man she thought she knew completely, but who still had secrets to share. In a shoebox in his closet, she found letters he'd written to his wife after she died. 20 years of letters addressed to "My dearest Margaret," telling her about his days, his thoughts, his loneliness. "I met someone today." One letter said, dated the week Sarah had first shown him Eleanor's documents. "A young woman named Sarah. She reminds me of you, Maggie. Stubborn, brave, too proud to ask for help, but smart enough to accept it when it's offered. I think Eleanor sent her to me. I think I'm supposed to help her somehow." Sarah read every letter, laughed at some, cried at others, understood finally why Tom Patterson had been so willing to take a chance on a stranger who claimed to have found his aunt's hidden inheritance. He'd been waiting for her, just like Eleanor had been waiting. Two people who'd never met Sarah, but who'd somehow known she would come. March 8th, Grace's 6th birthday. The party was bigger this year. Grace had friends now, a whole class of kindergartners who screamed and ran and ate too much cake. Sarah watched from the deck she'd helped build, marveling at how much had changed. "She's happy," Maria said, appearing at her elbow with a glass of lemonade. "Really, truly happy. That's rare, you know. A lot of kids go through what she went through and come out damaged, but Grace is thriving. She doesn't remember the hard times. She was too young. Maybe she remembers them differently, as adventures instead of tragedies." Maria watched Grace lead a group of children in some complicated game involving a lot of running and shouting. "Kids are resilient, especially when they're loved. I love her more than anything. I know, that's why she's okay." After the party, when the guests had gone and Grace was asleep, Sarah sat in the kitchen with Eleanor's letters. She did this sometimes, when she needed to remember, when she needed to feel connected to something larger than herself. 6 years, she said aloud to the empty room. 6 years since I found your letter. I wonder if you ever imagined it would turn out like this." The letters didn't answer, they never did. But Sarah had stopped needing them to. She knew what Eleanor would say, the same thing she always said in the words that had become Sarah's prayer and her promise, "Hide help where pride can't touch it." That's what Sarah was doing now. Every scholarship she funded, every woman she mentored, every piece of Eleanor's legacy she passed on, she was hiding help in places where desperate people could find it. April 22nd. The Eleanor Patterson Scholarship Fund celebrated its 5th anniversary. In 5 years, they'd given away over $400,000. 67 women had received funding for education, job training, or business development. 3 of them had gone on to start their own scholarship programs, paying Eleanor's gift forward. The anniversary celebration was held at the community college where Sarah had graduated. Over 100 people attended, recipients, donors. Community leaders who'd watched the fund grow from a settlement condition into a movement. Sarah gave a speech. She was good at speeches now, had learned to channel Eleanor's directness and Maria's warmth and Mr. Patterson's wisdom into words that moved people. "Eleanor Patterson never met any of us," Sarah said, looking out at the crowd. "She died 15 years before I found her letter. But she knew we were coming. She prepared for us. She believed in us before we existed." She paused, letting the words settle. That's what this fund is about, believing in people who haven't found their footing yet. Preparing for women who are still struggling, still fighting, still trying to figure out how to survive. We plant seeds today that will bloom in gardens we'll never see. The applause was overwhelming, but Sarah barely heard it. She was looking at a woman in the back row, young, tired, holding a baby that couldn't be more than a few months old. After the speech, Sarah found her. "Hi," she said. "I'm Sarah." "I know who you are." The woman looked nervous, overwhelmed. "I came because... I don't know why I came. I heard about the scholarships and I thought maybe... But I'm not really... What's your name? Rebecca? Rebecca Torres." Torres. Sarah's heart jumped. "Are you related to Jennifer Torres? She was our first scholarship recipient." "She's my sister." Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. "She told me about you, about what you did for her. She's a nurse now. Did you know that? She's got a good job, a nice apartment. Her kids are in good schools. She says it's all because of you." "It's because of Eleanor. I'm just the delivery mechanism." "That's what Jennifer said you'd say." Rebecca shifted the baby in her arms. I wasn't going to come. I don't like asking for help, but Jennifer said, she said you understand, that you were in the same place once. Sarah looked at this woman exhausted, scared, proud, and saw herself. Saw the version of herself from 7 years ago sleeping in her car, pregnant and alone, convinced that nobody would ever help her. What do you need? Sarah asked. I need... Rebecca's voice broke. I need someone to believe that I'm worth helping, that I can be more than this, that my son can have a better life than I had. Sarah reached out and took her hand. You're worth helping, she said. You're worth every penny Eleanor left behind, and your son is going to grow up knowing that his mother was brave enough to ask for what she needed. Rebecca started to cry. Sarah held her hand and let her. This was Eleanor's legacy. Not the money, not the property, not even the scholarship fund. This, one woman reaching out to another, one survivor telling another that survival was possible. The chain of help extending forward into a future that Eleanor would never see but had always believed in. June 15th, summer. Grace asked about her father for the first time in 2 years. They were eating dinner on the deck when she brought it up casual as if she were asking about the weather. Mom, why don't I have a dad? Sarah set down her fork. You do have a dad. His name is Tyler. He just isn't part of our lives. Why not? Because he made choices that meant he couldn't be, choices that hurt both of us. Grace thought about this. Was he mean? He was scared, and when some people get scared, they run away instead of staying to fight. Sarah reached across the table and took her daughter's hand. But his leaving wasn't about you, baby. You're perfect. He left because of his own problems, not because of anything you did. Do you miss him? Sarah considered the question. Did she miss Tyler, the man who'd thrown her clothes out the window, who'd shoved her while she was pregnant, who'd come back only when he heard about money? No, she said honestly. I used to be angry at him, for a long time. But now I'm just grateful. If he hadn't left, I wouldn't have bought the tiny house. I wouldn't have found Eleanor's letter. I wouldn't have become the person I am today. So him leaving was good. Him leaving was hard, but hard things can lead to good things if you let them. Sarah squeezed Grace's hand. You're the best thing that ever happened to me. Everything that led to you, even the painful parts, was worth it. Grace nodded, processing this with the seriousness of a 6-year-old tackling a complex problem. Mom, yes, baby. I'm glad it's just us. You're the best mom in the whole world. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. And you're the best daughter in the whole world. I know, Grace grinned. Can I have ice cream? Nice try? Finish your vegetables first. August 30th. Sarah received an unexpected letter. It came in a plain white envelope, no return address, postmarked from a town in Florida she'd never heard of. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a photograph. The photograph showed Tyler. Older now, thinner, standing next to a woman Sarah didn't recognize, and 2 children who looked about Grace's age. The letter read Sarah. I know I don't have any right to write to you. I know you probably threw this away without reading it, but if you're still reading, I need to say some things. I'm sorry. I know those words aren't enough. I know they can't undo what I did, but I've spent the last 7 years trying to become a different person, and the only way I can do that is by acknowledging who I was. I was a coward. I was selfish. I was cruel to you and to a child who hadn't even been born yet. I don't have any excuse. I was just weak, and I hated myself for being weak, and I took that hatred out on you. I'm married now. I have 2 kids, and every time I look at them, I think about the daughter I abandoned, the daughter I was too scared to meet. I wonder what she looks like, if she's happy, if she knows anything about me. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not asking to be part of her life. I know I lost that right when I walked away. I just wanted you to know that I think about her, that I'm ashamed of what I did, that if I could go back and change things, I would. I hope she's happy. I hope you're both happy. I hope the life you built without me is better than anything we could have had together. Tyler. Sarah read the letter 3 times. Then she put it in a drawer and closed it. She didn't know what to do with Tyler's apology. Didn't know if it was genuine or self-serving. Didn't know if it mattered either way. But she did know one thing: she wasn't going to tell Grace. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Her daughter didn't need her father's guilt. She had enough love without it. Some doors once closed were better left that way. December 25th. Christmas. 7 years since the first Christmas in the tiny house. 7 years of transformation, growth, survival. Sarah stood on the deck watching Grace build a snowman with Maria's grandchildren and thought about how far they'd come. The tiny house was different now. Still small, but renovated properly. New windows, new roof, new heating system, a bathroom that actually worked, a kitchen where Sarah cooked meals that Eleanor would have loved. The land behind the house was different too. A garden now where Sarah grew vegetables in summer, a swing set where Grace played with her friends, a fire pit where they roasted marshmallows and told stories about the people who'd built this place. Everything had changed, and everything had stayed the same. The house was still small, still humble, still the kind of place most people would drive past without a second glance. But to Sarah, it was everything. It was proof that survival was possible, that help could be hidden where pride couldn't touch it, that stubborn, desperate people could build something beautiful if they refused to give up. "Mom, Grace called from the yard. "Come help, the snowman needs a nose." Sarah walked into the snow and helped her daughter build a snowman. She put the carrot nose in place and wrapped her scarf around its neck and stood back to admire their work. "It's perfect," Grace declared. "It is. Can we name it Eleanor?" Sarah felt her heart swell. "Why Eleanor?" "Because you always say Eleanor helped us, so I want to help Eleanor be something beautiful." Grace looked up at her mother with serious eyes. "Is that okay?" "That's more than okay, baby. That's exactly right." March 8th. Grace's 10th birthday. 10 years old. Double digits. A whole decade of Grace. Eleanor Mitchell existing in the world. Sarah woke up early to make pancakes, Eleanor's recipe, which she'd found in one of Mr. Patterson's boxes. She added chocolate chips because Grace loved chocolate, and candles because 10 was a milestone worth celebrating. "Happy birthday, baby girl," Sarah said when Grace came stumbling into the kitchen still half asleep. "I'm not a baby, Thunny," Grace protested. "I'm 10. That's practically a teenager. You'll always be my baby, even when you're 50. Grace rolled her eyes but smiled. "Can I read Eleanor's letter today? The real one you always said I could when I was old enough." Sarah had been waiting for this moment, had been preparing for it since Grace first asked about the framed letters on the wall. "After breakfast," she promised. "We'll read it together." They sat on the couch, Grace curled against Sarah's side, and Sarah took Eleanor's original letter out of its frame for the first time in years. She handed it to her daughter. Grace read slowly, her lips moving with some of the harder words. Sarah watched her face change as she absorbed Eleanor's message, the story of the house, the explanation of what was hidden, the promise that someone would come who needed help. When Grace finished, her eyes were wet. "She never knew us," Grace whispered. "But she saved us anyway." She believed someone would come. She had faith. Faith in what? In people, in the future, in the idea that help planted today can bloom years later in ways we'll never see. Sarah put her arm around her daughter. "That's what we do now, baby. We plant seeds for people we'll never meet." "Like with the scholarships." "Exactly like that." Grace looked at the letter again. "Mom, can I write something too? Something to hide for someone to find later?" Sarah felt tears sliding down her face. "What would you write?" "I don't know yet, but I want whoever finds it to know that Eleanor's plan worked, that the help she hid actually helped someone, that it made our whole life possible." "I think that's a beautiful idea." They spent the afternoon composing Grace's letter. 10 years old, writing to strangers who might not exist yet, continuing a chain of hope that Eleanor had started before Grace's mother was even born. "Dear whoever finds this," the letter began, "my name is Grace Eleanor Mitchell. I'm named after Eleanor Patterson, who saved my mom and me before we were even born. This is her house. It used to look broken, but now it looks like love." September 15th. Sarah received her bachelor's degree in accounting. It had taken 8 years of night classes, online courses, and studying while Grace slept. 8 years of balancing work and motherhood and education. 8 years of proving that she was more than her worst moments. Grace was there when she walked across the stage. 10 years old, holding a sign that said, "My mom is still the best," in neater letters than the one from 5 years ago. Maria was there, Angela was there, Rosie was there, even though she'd officially retired 2 years ago, and somewhere Sarah knew Eleanor and Mr. Patterson were watching, proud of what she'd become, proud of what she'd built. "What now?" Maria asked after the ceremony. "You've got the degree. What are you going to do with it?" Sarah had been thinking about this for months. She had money more than enough to live on forever. She didn't need to work, but she needed to matter, needed to do something that would last beyond her own life. "I'm going to help other women start businesses," she said. "Single mothers like me, women who have ideas but no capital. I'm going to be the person who believes in them when nobody else does. Like Eleanor believed in you." Exactly like that. March 8th, Grace's 18th birthday. The tiny house was packed with people celebrating Grace's transition into adulthood. Friends from school, neighbors from down the road, scholarship recipients who'd become family over the years. Sarah stood in the kitchen watching her daughter laugh with her friends and felt the weight of 18 years pressing on her chest. Grace was leaving for college in the fall, full scholarship to a university 3 states away. She'd be studying environmental science planning to spend her life protecting the kind of land that Eleanor and James had treasured. "She's ready," Maria said, appearing at Sarah's side. Older now, moving slower, but still sharp-eyed and wise. "I know, that doesn't make it easier." "Nothing worth doing is easy. You taught her that." After the party, when the guests had left and the cleanup was done, Grace found Sarah on the deck looking out at the land that had saved them. "Mom, can we talk?" They sat together on the steps that Maria had helped build 12 years ago. "I found something," Grace said. "In Grandpa Tom's papers. You gave me his boxes to go through before I leave." "What did you find?" Grace pulled out a folded document. "It's a letter he wrote to Eleanor after he found out you'd discovered the inheritance." Sarah took the paper with trembling hands. "Dear Eleanor," she read aloud, "I found her, the person you were waiting for. Her name is Sarah Mitchell, and she's got your stubbornness and James's patience and more courage than anyone I've ever met. She bought your house for $1. Can you imagine? Everyone laughed at her, and she did it anyway. Just like you would have done. Just like James would have done. I watched her fight for what you left behind. Watched her refuse to give up even when the whole world was against her. Watched her turn that tiny house into something beautiful. You were right, Eleanor. You were right to believe someone would come. You were right to hide help where pride couldn't touch it. Your faith was rewarded. I wish you could see her daughter, Grace Eleanor Mitchell, named after you and living up to it every day. She's stubborn and kind and brave, just like her mother, just like you. The legacy continues. The chain doesn't break. Everything you and James built, everything you sacrificed to protect, it's going to survive. It's going to grow. It's going to change lives for generations to come. You did it, Eleanor. You did what you set out to do 60 years ago. You saved someone who needed saving. Your loving nephew, Tom, Sarah finished reading and looked at her daughter. Both of them were crying now. He never sent it, Grace said. I think he wrote it for himself, to process what happened. He sent it in his own way, by giving it to you to find. Grace leaned her head on Sarah's shoulder. I'm scared to leave. What if I forget where I came from? What if I become someone Eleanor wouldn't recognize? You won't, you can't. Sarah put her arm around her daughter. Eleanor is in your blood now, not literally, but in every way that matters. Her stubbornness, her faith, her refusal to give up, that's who you are. That's who you'll always be. How do you know? Because I raised you, because I taught you, because you're the best thing I ever did, and nothing I create will ever be more important than who you become. Grace was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, Mom, when you're gone someday, not for a long time, I know, but when you're gone, I'm going to keep the tiny house. I'm going to maintain it and protect it and make sure Eleanor's letters stay on the wall. And when I have kids, I'm going to tell them where they came from, the whole story, every part of it. Sarah felt her heart crack open with love and pride and gratitude. That's all I've ever wanted, she whispered. For the story to continue, for the chain to stay unbroken. It won't break, I promise. I'll make sure it never breaks. They sat on the deck until the stars came out, Mahawa, mother and daughter, looking at the land that had saved them. The land that Eleanor and James had protected. The land that would belong to Grace someday and to her children after her. The tiny house stood behind them, small and humble and filled with more history than any mansion could hold. And somewhere in the darkness, Sarah could almost feel them watching. Eleanor, who'd planted a seed 60 years ago. James, who'd spent his life protecting what they'd built. Tom, who'd found Sarah when she needed finding. All of them watching, waiting, believing that the future would be worthy of what they'd sacrificed. Sarah closed her eyes and made a silent promise. I'll keep going. I'll keep building. I'll keep hiding help where pride can't touch it. And when my time comes, I'll leave something behind that matters. Something that proves you were right to believe in me. The stars shone down on the tiny house on Persimmon Lane. The house that had been worthless. The house that had been laughed at. The house that had become everything. Grace fell asleep on Sarah's shoulder the way she used to when she was small. Sarah held her daughter close and felt the completeness of everything she'd built. Not just the money, not just the land, not just the scholarships or the degree or the business she was starting, the completeness of a life that had been rescued from destruction and rebuilt into something beautiful. Tomorrow, Grace would leave for college. Tomorrow, the tiny house would feel empty in a way it never had before. Tomorrow, Sarah would have to figure out who she was without her daughter beside her every day. But tonight, there was this mother and her daughter, a house full of memories, a legacy that would never end. Sarah looked up at the stars and smiled. She had bought a condemned house for $1. She had found a dead woman's letter hidden under the floorboards. She had fought a corporation and won. She had built a scholarship fund that had changed dozens of lives. She had raised a daughter who understood the value of what they'd been given. And now, finally, she understood what Eleanor had known all along. The things people dismiss as worthless are often the things most worth keeping. The help we hide today blooms in gardens we'll never see. The legacy we leave isn't measured in dollars or acres or buildings. It's measured in the lives we change, the hope we plant, and the people we teach to never give up. Sarah Mitchell had learned these lessons the hard way. In darkness and desperation, in cold cars and condemned buildings, in the ashes of everything she thought her life would be. But she had learned them, and she had passed them on. And that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. The tiny house stood in the darkness, small and humble and eternal, waiting for whoever might need it next. And somewhere in the night, Eleanor Grace Patterson was finally at peace, knowing that her faith had been rewarded, her promise had been kept, and her legacy would live on forever in the hearts of the stubborn, desperate, beautiful people who refused to give up.